Hello there, and welcome back to the next part of All the Young Dudes. This part will cover chapters 81 through 90. Chapter 81, 5th Year, Unforgivable. Remus, James and Mr. Potter ran forward at once. Remus collapsed to his knees, reaching Sirius first. He was lying face down, black hair pouring like blood on the red carpet. Remus didn't even think, just rolled him over. His face was pale, his eyes were closed, but he was alive. Yes, Remus could hear Sirius's heart pounding hard behind his ribs. He could smell the stink of fear mixed with adrenaline. Sirius? James was there too, pressing his head to Sirius's chest to listen. "He's alive," Remus said, his voicing sounding strange. He was clutching Sirius's shoulders still, where he had turned him. He couldn't let go, his hands fisting the fine velvet dress robes. "Effie!" Mr. Potter was shouting. "Quickly!" He bent over Sirius. "Stand back, boys, give him some air." Sirius stirred slightly, his eyelashes fluttered, but nothing more. "What's wrong with him?" Remus asked the room, desperately. Mr. Potter was guiding him away. He had to let go. He crawled backwards, crab-like, as Mrs. Potter rushed in. He knew his legs wouldn't stand, just yet. Euphemia Potter was on the carpet in seconds, pulling Sirius's head into her lap. He must have made another noise because she started whispering to him, sweet, small things. "Shh, now, love, I'm here, you're safe, shh." Remus felt his eyes well up, drew his legs up under his chin and wrapped his arms around them. What was happening? He looked over at James, sitting opposite him on the living room floor, just as shocked, just as frightened. There was a distant crack outside, and Mr. Potter left the room, returning moments later with Dumbledore. He seemed to bring the cold in with him. Remus felt the chill settle into his bones, despite the fire which continued to blaze. "Moody's outside," the old man said to James's father. "Protective charms, everything in his arsenal. No one else will be coming here tonight." "Good," Remus thought. "Good. Lock us all up in here. Never let anyone near him again." "How is he, Effie?" Dumbledore stood over Mrs. Potter, who was still cradling Sirius. She was performing some kind of magic, her eyes closed, wand running over the unconscious boy's body. Her lips were moving fast without making a sound. She eventually looked up, more shaken than Remus had ever seen her, fiery rage in her eyes. "He'll live," she said. "He needs rest." "Was it?" Mr. Potter looked nervous. Mrs. Potter closed her eyes again and nodded. "Cruciatus." James's covered his face with his hands. Remus just felt empty, as if everything that had ever made any kind of sense to him had been wrung out. The torture curse. "Boys," Mr. Potter suddenly said sharply, looking at James, then Remus, "I know you want to stay, but we need you to go to bed just now. There's nothing you can do for Sirius at the moment." "But, Dad," James started, climbing shakily to his feet. There were tears in his eyes too. "James," Mrs. Potter said from the floor. "No, bed." She didn't shout, but every man in the room seemed to shrink slightly. There was no question of disobeying her. Remus wasn't sure how he got up, whether Dumbledore helped him or whether he did it himself. Nor was he sure how he left the room that Sirius was in. It seemed like hours later that he was standing on the first-floor landing with James. Gully was lighting candles throughout the house, moving silently. The portraits along the staircases were sleeping. James held open his bedroom door, and Remus went inside without a word. They lay on the bed, side by side, over the covers, still in their clothes. They had been sitting on the same bed only 2 or 3 hours before, waiting for Sirius to tell them he was okay. In the dark, James and Remus collected themselves, giving each other the time they needed. James broke the quiet, of course. "He's here now," he said tonelessly. "He's here now, and Mum won't ever let him go back. I know it." Remus nodded because there weren't any words. He didn't know if James saw. They were both staring straight up. His mind was racing, and he said the first thing that felt like a coherent thought. "Is that what happens with that curse?" "I don't know. I've never seen it." "No, of course. Mum used to be a healer. If anyone can help him. And Dumbledore's here." "Yeah, exactly. If he's—" Remus's voice cracked and he stopped talking. "I know, mate," James whispered. They did not speak again until the morning. Christmas Day, 1975. Remus couldn't believe he had fallen asleep. He cursed himself for being so thoughtless, so selfish. "You've no right to him," he told himself angrily as he sat up, climbing off James's huge, comfortable four-poster bed. "You've no right to call yourself his friend at all, if you can't even stay awake when he's—" He didn't know how Sirius was. He left James still sleeping and went to the bathroom. It was morning. The curtains had been drawn, presumably by Gully, and watery winter daylight filled the stairwell. The house was very quiet. No one else was awake yet. There was no usual smell of breakfast cooking or tea brewing on the hob. After he'd been to the loo and had a quick wash, Remus stood awkwardly in the hall. He didn't want to go back into James's room. That seemed a bit weird, especially when he had his own things all laid out in one of the guest rooms. Sirius was in the room at the end of the hall. Remus could smell him. Mrs. Potter was in there too. He didn't know where Mr. Potter was. "Master Lupin!" A squeaky voice startled him from the stairs. It was Gully, his big brown eyes full of innocent concern. "Is you wanting breakfast, Master Lupin?" Remus shook his head. "No, thank you. 'Tis a terrible thing, terrible bad thing." The wizened little creature shook its head sadly, ears wilting like a sorry puppy. "Yes, terrible." Remus sat on the stairs, glad for someone to talk to. "I'm telling my mistress and my master we've got to be careful. We've got to protect our own. Gully is thinking we should go into hiding. Gully knows lots of families going into hiding now." Gully's brow creased as if he was trying to remember something exactly right. "But my mistress is saying to me, 'Gully, we is responsible. We is a good, lucky family, and we has many good things. Mistress tells me we needs to be looking after everyone we can. She says if we don't, we is having nothing worth protecting at all.'" Didn't do a very good job of protecting Sirius. Remus scuffed the carpet angrily with his toe. "No," Gully shook his big round head again. "Always, in war, there is people getting hurt." Remus bit his lip. Behind them a door opened. "Gully?" The weak voice of Mrs. Potter came. "Will you come and sit with Sirius while I—" "Oh, hello, Remus, dear." She had been up all night, that was clear, but she still had a smile for him. "Is he okay?" Remus stood up. "No lasting damage," she croaked, her smile waning slightly. "Not on the outside, anyway. He's sleeping still, just a mild dose of potion. Would you like to sit with him? I need a little lie-down before Monty gets home." Yeah, of course." Remus started forward, eager to help in any way he could. He crossed the landing quickly and slipped into the room. "Send Gully to wake me as soon as he opens his eyes," Euphemia said, patting his shoulder gently. "Dumbledore will want to speak to him. He wanted to last night, but I wouldn't let him. Poor lamb." "He was conscious then, last night?" "Yes, for a little while," Euphemia sighed, deeply, hollow with exhaustion. "But he was in no fit state for an interrogation." Remus nodded dumbly. She closed the door behind her. The room was dark, but that was okay. Remus could see in the dark. Often he liked it. The figure lying in the bed could not possibly be his friend, Sirius Black. Because Sirius Black never slept like that, facing up, hands by his side, covers neatly tucked over his chest. Sirius slept like a dog, all rumbled sheets and limbs akimbo, face down, arms thrown wide. Remus approached with caution. Was this how it was, he wondered, the morning after a full moon? Was this how it felt to see your friend torn apart? It was unbearable. He sat in the seat by the bedside, a squashy purple armchair with a book splayed open on one arm. Unforgivable, caring for the victims of curses and hexes. Remus closed the book, wondering whether Mrs. Potter had needed to consult it many times before. There was a handkerchief underneath it, damp with tears. Remus could smell the salt. It must have been difficult for her, as a healer and a mother. Had she looked at this black-haired boy and seen James? Had she wondered what kind of parent would do such a thing? He sat in the quiet, listening to Sirius breathing. Stupidly, he thought of Grant, who could be no help at all, except that he probably would have hugged Remus, and Remus felt that a hug was the only thing he wanted in the world just now. The church bells echoed up the hill from the village. It was Christmas Day. James came in and joined him after an hour or so. He brought tea, and Remus accepted it gratefully. James raised his dark eyebrows at Remus, questioning, and Remus shook his head. No, James sat on the arm of the chair and they did not speak. It was another hour before Sirius so much as moved. A quiet stirring, then a flicker in his features, before his eyes eased open, heavy with sleep. It took him a moment to focus, and the room was still very gloomy. When he finally caught the shapes of James and Remus, his brow furrowed, then he cracked a smile. "Bloody hell," he said hoarsely. "Who died?" James laughed. "Wanker. Tosspot," Sirius threw back. "Arse." "Oi!" Sirius pushed himself up on his elbows. "Be nice, I'm an invalid, you know." "Tell you what," James grinned, "you really know how to make an entrance." "It's in my noble blood." Sirius smiled, then faltered, his eyes suddenly stricken. They all fell quiet again. "Sorry," he muttered, looking down. "Tea?" "Please." "Gully." James summoned the house elf, who was only too pleased to serve. "So," Sirius asked, the colour slowly returning to his cheeks, "you two been keeping a bedside vigil for me?" "Actually, it's Mum who was up all night." "Oh, yeah." Sirius's face grew distant, closed off. "I'll thank her, obviously. Say sorry for showing up like that." "Don't be stupid." James shook his head. "She'd do anything for you. She loves you." Sirius's eyes filled with tears, and he looked away. Fortunately, Gully reappeared at that moment with a tea tray laden with cups, saucers, toast, muffins, sausages, eggs, scrambled, fried and boiled, smoked salmon, kippers, and even cereal. None of them ate very much. Remus was hungry, starving actually, but everything tasted like plastic, so in the end he just downed cup after cup of scalding tea. No milk, no sugar. He wasn't angry yet. Anger was his usual response to feeling helpless or sad or in pain, but he felt like it might come later. Just now, he wanted to be whatever Sirius needed. "Oh," he said suddenly, "I was supposed to get your mum, James, as soon as Sirius woke up." "Let her sleep," Sirius said, resting back on his pillows. "No, she wanted me to, so that she could get Dumbledore." "What for?" James asked, perplexed. "Everything's fine now." He wanted to ask some questions. "No," Sirius said. James and Remus both turned to look at Sirius, who had paled again, his eyes big and frightened. "Please," he said. "Not yet, just let me have Christmas, okay? I don't want to talk about it." "Okay, mate, it's okay," James said softly, leaning over to pat Sirius's shoulder. "We won't wake her up. You can pretend to be asleep if you want, anything you want." "Thanks." Sirius relaxed back again. "Sorry." Pff, James blew his hair up from his forehead. "It's Christmas, isn't it?" Chapter 82, 5th Year, Aftermath. No one was angry that they'd tried to protect Sirius. Mrs. Potter rose from her own bed when Mr. Potter returned from wherever he'd been, and they both agreed that Dumbledore was sure to arrive of his own accord eventually, and anything he wanted to ask Sirius could wait until then. They salvaged the rest of the morning as best they could. Mr. Potter cheerfully offered to apparate all of the presents up to Sirius's bedroom, but Sirius wouldn't have it. "My legs work fine," he insisted. "I want to come down and see the tree." So they all gathered themselves up and got dressed or changed, then reconvened half an hour later in the living room. Remus couldn't help staring at the patch of carpet where he had seen Sirius's body fall less than 12 hours previous. The pain was sharp and startling. He had to look at the current conscious Sirius, bundled up in blankets with yet another mug of tea on the couch opposite him, just to feel normal again. The unwrapping of gifts still felt as joyful and natural as ever. A free-for-all, no order to it. They simply tore at wrapping paper until they were surrounded by it, strips of brightly coloured debris. It didn't matter what anyone got, only the memory of having received something nice on that awful morning. The Potters, of course, had plenty ready for both Sirius and Remus, and they promised Sirius even more yet to come. "We'll get you some nice pictures to brighten up your room," Mrs. Potter said. "Which Quidditch team do you support, sweetheart? Or perhaps one of those rock stars you kids like?" Sirius looked at her as if he'd just received the most wonderful gift of his life. Perhaps he had. "Most of my stuff's at Hogwarts," he said. "It's just clothes at home." He looked a bit embarrassed, and Remus knew he was also thinking about the rude posters he had permanently affixed to his bedroom walls. You could be sure he would not be doing that in his new room at the Potters. Well, you can borrow some of James's things for a little while. Perhaps we'll go shopping in the new year. They sat down to a quiet Christmas lunch. Evidently someone had disinvited the guests that had been planned for, which to Remus was a blessing. He was already worm-thin from too much worry and not enough sleep. He did not need Darius Barebones thrown into the mix. He did think of the Pettigrews and wonder if Peter was worried or feeling left out. Gully was just about to set light to the Christmas pudding when the asterisk crack of apparition sounded outside the front gate. Dumbledore. Sirius jumped and looked as if he wanted to get up from the table, but stayed put. Mr. Potter smiled at them all reassuringly and went to the door. Everyone listened intently. "Albus, Merry Christmas. Fleamont, I take it Sirius has had his rest." "Yes, we were just about to have. I did request that you contact me as soon as he woke up." "Come in, Dumbledore. Join us for some pudding." Dumbledore stalked into the room. He was wearing sombre robes in deep brownish maroon like dried blood. He looked as though his night had been just as long as theirs. He was followed in by a stocky man who resembled a rather grizzled bulldog. He had a mass of greyish ginger hair and mean dark eyes which darted furtively around the room as if scouting for trouble. "Albus, Alistair!" Mrs. Potter got up, waving her wand. 2 more chairs appeared at the dinner table, as well as small plates, forks, napkins, and goblets. "Won't you join us for pudding?" "Not now, Effie." The stocky man, Alistair, grunted. "On duty." She gave him a look not dissimilar to the look she had given James last night. He cleared his throat and sat down quickly. Remus smirked. He had to find out exactly how she did that. Mothers had their own magic, it seemed. Dumbledore took his place with more decorum. His expression, as ever, was still as a millpond and impossible to read. He was looking at Sirius. There it was. Remus felt it settle around him like an old friend. Rage. The desire to lunge across the table and shake Dumbledore senseless was so strong and so tangible that he found himself gripping the seat of his chair. The stranger, Alistair, turned to look at him. Remus felt himself being scanned by those dark, perceptive eyes. Oh, he knew Remus was a werewolf. Remus wasn't sure how he knew that Alistair knew, but he did. There was no question. Remus raised his chin and looked him in the eye. Alistair smiled, slightly, as if this had confirmed something he had hoped for, then turned back to Dumbledore. "Sirius," their head teacher said quietly, "how are you?" "Fine." Sirius nodded, staring at the big dark pudding at the centre of the table. Gully snapped his fingers and it caught a light, the blue flame shimmering like strange magical vapour. "I'd like to discuss last night's events with you," Dumbledore pressed. "I know it isn't pleasant, and you may wish to forget, but anything you tell me might be useful. Do you understand?" "Yes, fine." Sirius nodded, expression unchanged. The flame died, and Gully clicked his fingers again. The pudding divided neatly into 8 portions. It was rich and moist and cloying, the fruit and brandy stuck in their throats. They ate quietly for a moment before Mr. Potter felt he had to speak. "Not seeing your family today, Moody?" Alistair shook his head. "The job comes first. I'll be here as long as you need me." "We're very grateful," Mrs. Potter said, the kindness returning to her tone. "Alastair is an aura," Mr. Potter explained to the boys. Remus saw the light of recognition go on in James and Sirius's eyes and made a mental note to inquire later. If he had to guess, he assumed it meant some kind of wizard bodyguard. He thought of Charles Bronson in Death Wish and imagined Alistair Moody with a gun. Once pudding was eaten, they all returned to the living room. Sirius sat on the sofa with James and Remus either side. They had sat in the same formation last Christmas when Dumbledore had arrived to announce the deaths of the Frasers. Remus had not thought of the Frasers at all since then, not really, only as part of the ever-darkening backdrop of a war he would prefer not to worry about. He had so much else to distract him. One of these distractions was sitting beside him, right now. Their knees knocked together occasionally. Sirius wouldn't sit still. Remus tried not to flinch away, in case it was misread. "I hope this will not take long." Dumbledore smiled, pleasantly, as if this was nothing more than a friendly chat. "Sirius, We just need to know anything you can remember about the events which led to you arriving here at 11:15 last night. Was that the time? Sirius blinked. I thought it was later. Dumbledore folded his hands in his lap and smiled. In your own time, please. Sirius cleared his throat and glanced at James, who smiled at him in a brotherly way. Sirius looked at Dumbledore again. I thought it would be okay. I never really got on with my family that well, since I'm in Gryffindor, you know. But I thought it would be okay. We have a family dinner every year on Christmas Eve, the whole family. Who was there? Moody asked. He was taking notes. A quill hovered just at chest level, scribbling quickly onto a piece of floating parchment. All of the Blacks. Sirius looked up at him. And the Lestranges, the Malfoys, Narcissa and her husband, anyway. Not Andromeda, obviously. The Goyles arrived later. And the Knots, the Crabs. Barty Crouch was visiting. He's friends with my brother. Crouch? Moody sounded surprised. Dumbledore smiled again, inclining his head. That would be Bartimus Jr., of course. Yeah, Sirius nodded. Little git. Quite the gathering, eh, Albus? Moody muttered. Quite. Please, Sirius, do go on. So, yeah, it was all normal, really. Normal for us. Dinner, dancing, snobby stuff. He paused, looking ashamed. They toasted to Voldemort. I didn't join in, though, Professor. I swear. It was sort of jokey. I don't even know how serious they were. Dad was a bit drunk. Dumbledore's expression did not change. Sirius was looking at his feet now and kept talking faster and faster. I was supposed to talk to James at 8, so I tried to sort of sneak off. But my cousin, Bellatrix, she caught me and cornered me in the library. She said as I was nearly of age, it was time I started taking my role as heir more seriously, leave my friends behind and grow up. I told her to... Well, I wasn't very nice. She called my parents. Reg came in too. And Crouch. I wasn't worried, because... Well, everyone knows Bella's a bit bonkers, so I thought they'd just tell her to stay out of it. But they didn't. They sided with her. Dad said... He said he wanted me to make him proud for once. I told him I was trying, but... Sirius paused for breath. The silence was agony. He continued. Anyway, they wanted me to swear allegiance to Voldemort. I thought they were joking. They were saying all this mad stuff about Muggleborns and blood traitors, and... Then Bellatrix showed me her arm. She's got this tattoo. He looked up as if realizing this piece of information was useful. It's the dark mark, sir, the skull and snake. She said she's chosen a side, and it was time for me to choose mine. I said no. I said it so many times. He closed his eyes, looking down again. And they hurt you for it? Dumbledore prompted. They tried to persuade you? Yes. Bellatrix did this? No. Your mother? Your father? Sirius's breathing was very shallow, but he kept going. He nodded. They took turns. Mrs. Potter stood up suddenly and left the room. Remus didn't blame her. His urge to hit something was reaching critical levels. But you managed to escape, Dumbledore pushed gently. Sirius nodded again. After a while, I must have stopped saying no, because, well, it just hurt too much. I couldn't say anything. They must have needed me to agree, because they left me there. They locked me in the library. But there's a fireplace there and flue powder. I don't know, maybe they wanted me to go. He sounded very tired now, but the story was told, and there was an air of relief. Thank you, Sirius, Dumbledore said very softly. This has been a great help. I won't disrupt your Christmas any further. He stood smoothly and glanced at Mr. Potter. Your offer to house Sirius until he comes of age still stands, I assume. As much as it did when he was 12, Mr. Potter said, straightening his back. He was a head shorter than Dumbledore, but at that moment, Fleamont Potter was the tallest man in the room. Excellent, Dumbledore nodded. I shall see you boys in January, then. Wait! Sirius jumped up. Professor, what about my brother? Do you believe Regulus is in danger? I don't think they'll hurt him. He's good at doing as he's told. He only wants to please our parents. But they'll make him join Voldemort. He'll get marked. He's 16 next year, and... Does Regulus want to leave? No, not like I did. Then we cannot force him. He is in no immediate danger. I'm sorry, Sirius. Sirius hung his head, sat back down. Dumbledore left quietly, shaking Mr. Potter's hand. Moody left too, returning to his station outside the Potter's front gate. Remus watched him through the window. What a very strange man. "Mr. Potter," Sirius said, unnaturally polite, "please may I borrow some parchment? I'd like to write to Andromeda." "Of course, my boy." Mr. Potter nodded. He led Sirius and James into his study. Remus stayed put, feeling that he wasn't really needed just now. The Potters were there to support Sirius. They could do whatever was necessary. He, Remus, was only really useful when Sirius needed some sense slapped into him, verbally, of course, or when a prank needed ironing out. And there would be plenty of time for those things once this particular storm had passed. Again, Remus wished he could speak to Grant. There was definitely a phone box in town. If he wanted to, Remus could call St. Edmund's S, and Matron would probably hand the phone over. She wasn't a jailer. But Moody was, and Remus didn't much like the idea of explaining why he fancied a trip into the village on Christmas Day. He closed his eyes and tried to imagine what Grant might say. Bloody hell. Probably. They went to bed early that night. There was nothing else to do. James didn't even suggest flying practice. They played a few half-hearted games of chess, but everyone kept yawning so much that in the end it was ridiculous to try and stay up. They piled into James's bed, even Remus. He tried to maneuver it so that James ended up in the middle, but Sirius crawled over them and plonked himself down between his two friends. "Budge up, Mooney," he grinned, with a sharp elbow in the ribs. Remus kept as close to the edge as possible. Touching Sirius underneath the covers, even with his toe, was utterly unthinkable. "This is weird," he thought. "Mates don't share a bed, even best mates. This is so weird." He tried to sleep. James began to snore, and Sirius's breathing levelled out. Remus relaxed. He could definitely imagine what Grant would say to this. "I knew you boarding school lads were all poofs." Remus couldn't help chuckling slightly under his breath. Sirius rolled over to face him, eyes open, wide awake. "What are you giggling at, Mooney?" "Nothing," Remus whispered back, embarrassed. "Just not used to sharing a bed." "Yeah, James's snoring is pretty bad. And it's weird, right?" Remus wanted to say. "Don't you think we're weird?" Was all he said. "I can't sleep." Sirius sighed. "I could get James's mum. She might have some more potion." "Don't want any more potion." Sirius sounded overtired and sulky, like a child. Remus was glad. That made him easier to deal with. "Well, just shut your eyes then," he instructed. "I keep thinking about it." "Oh, sorry. No, not like that. I just mean, it's weird, but while they were doing it, before I sort of stopped thinking, I was thinking about you." "Me?" "Yeah, I was thinking. At least now I know how Mooney feels. When we were researching all that stuff to help you on the full moon, there was a description in one of the records, written by a witch who had lycanthropy. She said the pain of transformation was similar to the Cruciatus curse." "Oh, I never heard that. I don't think it can be. I think Cruciatus must be much worse." "Maybe," Sirius agreed, "but it helped a bit. I thought, if Mooney can do it, so can I." Remus didn't have a proper response. "Go to sleep, Sirius." "All right. Night." Night. He waited for Sirius to fall asleep, properly this time, then carefully got up and went back to his own bed. Chapter 83. 5th year, January. "Throw me a line, I'm sinking fast. Clutching at straws, can't make it. Havana sound we're trying. Hard edge, the hipster jiving. Last picture shows down the drive-in. You're so sheer, you're so chic. Teenage Rebel of the Week. Sunday the 4th of January, 1976. The rest of the Christmas break passed in a shaky, black and white sort of way. The Potters hosted a small gathering for New Year's Eve, but very few people came. Many of their close circle were now working for Dumbledore, Mrs. Potter explained, and busy with the war effort, whatever that was. Their peripheral friends had either turned their backs on the Potters, "We're blood traitors," James proudly declared, or else were simply too frightened to associate themselves. Moody would not hear of Mrs. Potter taking Sirius to Diagon Alley, but he needed shoes to begin the new term in, so they all sloped down to the village one afternoon. There Sirius had fallen madly in love with a pair of brand-new black Doc Martens with bright yellow laces. Remus was pretty jealous. His own pair had been knockoffs from down the market and had fallen apart long ago. On their way back from town, they'd passed a couple of punks, a very odd sight in this little country village, but Remus supposed there were teenagers everywhere. One of them had a row of heavy silver rings in the cartilage of one ear, the other had green hair. Mrs. Potter had forbidden any dyeing of hair, but the night before school was due to begin, Remus had relented after hours of Sirius's begging and helped him pierce one of his earlobes using his prefect pin and a potato. It had bled a lot, but Sirius was thrilled. Thus he presented himself before Remus the morning they were setting off for London. He had messed up his hair for volume, flipped it over one shoulder to show off his new gold earring, stood with his legs apart like a guitarist, hands in his pockets, big black buffer boots, muggle insight. He grinned at Remus, putting a cigarette between his teeth. "How do I look?" "Like a twat," James said. "Like a rock star," Remus said, groaning inwardly. He was doomed. He had hoped really, that Sirius's trauma might have cooled Remus's considerable ardour towards his best friend. Might jolt him into realizing that as friendship was all they would ever have, he ought to focus his energies on just being a bloody good friend. But no, Sirius was a demigod, and Remus was helpless to do anything but worship him. "You silly lovesick prat," he told himself. At any rate, Remus was glad to be going back to Hogwarts, where lines were very clearly drawn and there were exams to focus on. Sirius turned heads at King's Cross. Muggles didn't give him half a glance, but wizards, or more accurately, witches, stared. Mary came clacking over to him on the platform in a pair of turquoise suede boots with a heel that brought her up to his height. "Hiya, gorgeous," she chirped, then hugged him fiercely, and Remus caught the look on his face over her shoulder. He looked pleased. It must be nice after a hard time to hold someone in your arms like that, especially someone as emotionally open as Mary. Remus allowed his own pain to peak, then subside, slowly, concentrating on smiling and listening to Marlene tell him all about her Christmas. Once aboard, they bundled into their usual carriage, and Remus would be forever thankful to Lily, who suggested that he join her in patrolling the length of the train a few times. "You look like you could do with some air," she smiled up at him. "Yeah, cheers. Stuffy in there. Full on Christmas with the Marauders, then?" "You can say that again." "Poor Remus." She linked her arm with his, leaning against him slightly. It felt nice, like a mini cuddle. She had a small, soft sort of body. Maybe that was the attraction with girls. "I heard about Sirius," she said very quietly. "Is he okay?" "Yeah," Remus nodded. "Think so? How did you know?" Sev told me, actually. I didn't believe him, but based on Sirius's new look—" "Fuck, how does he know?" Lily shrugged. "Does everyone know?" "Only that he's been kicked out and disinherited. No one knows why." She was looking at him, and he realized she wanted him to tell her why. "It's complicated," he said. "I don't think he'd want everyone to know." "You're a good friend." She patted his arm. "Yeah," he thought bitterly. "I'm a great friend, me. All I think about is Sirius. Sirius's safety, Sirius's happiness, Sirius's hands, Sirius's neck, Sirius's mouth, Sirius throwing me down on the bed and—" "Stop. Nope, not the time. Fuck's sake." "Oi!" Lily was shouting suddenly, pointing down the long corridor of the moving train. "If that's you, Crouch, I'll have your guts for garters." Barty Crouch. Remus's stomach turned. He had been there on Christmas Eve, nasty little creep. The fair-haired 14-year-old was tormenting some first-year girls, levitating their book bags over their heads. Lily, ever fearless, marched over, threatening detention, loss of points, even a few hexes. He sneered at her, but let the bags drop. "Barty, what are you— Oh!" The door of the nearest compartment slid open, and Regulus Black appeared. His eyes narrowed at Lily. "What do you want, Evans?" "No need to be so rude," she tutted. She raised an eyebrow at Crouch. "Stay out of trouble, or I'll be speaking with Slughorn. You're on thin ice already, and you know it. Come on, Remus." She glanced back at Lupin, who was still standing a little way back, hoping to avoid doing his prefectly duty. Regulus's head snapped back. He stared at Remus, and all of the arrogance vanished. He looked so much younger. "Lupin," he said stiffly. Remus just nodded. Regulus opened his mouth once or twice. He obviously wanted to ask. Remus wanted to hit him, but not in front of Lily. He remembered Sirius's desperate concern for his brother and saw it reflected back at him in Regulus's eyes. "He's fine," Remus blurted out. Regulus blinked, then nodded, then turned back into his car, slamming the door. Barty scratched his head in shock, looking very confused. Thursday, the 15th of January, 1976. As the second term got into full swing, Remus realized he needn't have worried so much. He didn't even have to try to avoid Sirius. Owls were just around the corner now, scheduled to begin in May, and if the fifth-year students thought their workload had been heavy during the first term, they were in for a very rude awakening. Remus combated this added stress by spending every spare hour he could in the library or in the common room perfecting practical spells. By the third week, he found that he had somehow become the unelected leader of a sort of homework and revision club. A group of fifth years and even some younger students had started coming to him for tips or advice on their own work. "Lupin, what's the flicky bit you do for locomotive spells? I keep doing it wrong." "Remus, is it a par-ecium or a par-ecium?" "Hey, Lupin, can you show me how you did that timeline again? I keep forgetting." Remus pretended that he found the whole thing a huge imposition, but he was secretly thrilled. He was good at something. The Marauders, when he saw them, thought it was hilarious and had taken to calling him Professor. One student in particular had started joining him for regular study sessions. A fourth-year Gryffindor called Christopher Barley. He was quiet and studious, with serious dark eyes and long, slender fingers. He was shy, but when Remus said hello to him, he gave an incredible smile, lighting up from the inside. Remus realized after the third or fourth time he bumped into Christopher somewhere in the castle by coincidence that the younger boy had a crush on him. "I'm getting better at this," he thought guiltily. The feeling was, unfortunately, not at all mutual. Remus was flattered, of course. It was hard not to be. But he couldn't summon up any feelings beyond sympathy for Christopher. Neither of them were brave enough to say anything, which was just as well. On top this, Remus had his prefect duties, which seemed to multiply with each week. After a Hufflepuff and Muggle-born prefect had been hexed before Christmas while on a nightly patrol and not been found until the morning, the heads of each house demanded that prefects patrol in pairs at all times. These patrols had become a nightly farce for Remus, as he spent most of the time trying to direct Lily away from wherever the other three Marauders were out of bed, working on some nefarious scheme or other. This worked most of the time. The problem was that since Christmas, James and Sirius had become more daring than ever. Armed with the Marauders' map and the invisibility cloak, they navigated the castle like a pair of pirates, pillaging and laying waste. Several times Remus would get back from patrol and find them not in their beds, only for the two boys to return an hour later, laughing and full of bravado, telling him how they had almost been caught this time. Almost. Quidditch, too, kept them busy, and apart from Remus. The match with Slytherin had been the first game of the year and resulted in a tie, which meant that both houses were now competing ruthlessly for the cup. With James now at the helm, the Gryffindor team was practicing twice as often every week, and Potter was dragging Sirius out every morning at the crack of dawn for a jog. In fact, between Remus's desire to study, his group of disciples and his prefect duties, his scant free time barely ever seemed to coincide with that of his friends. He barely saw them at meal times or before bed, except for Peter, whose only extracurricular activity was his girlfriend. So it came as something of a surprise one night in mid-January when Remus bumped into Sirius. It was a routine patrol, and Remus and Lily's last of the week. The full moon was due in 2 days, and Remus had cunningly manipulated the prefect's rota to avoid those nights. He had offered to take charge of the rota for their house, in fact, and the rest of the Gryffindor prefects were obviously relieved. They were all good at their jobs, of course, with a strong sense of justice and fairness combined with the courage to do the right thing. But few Gryffindors could ever be bothered with the admin. Remus seized this opportunity, and it had so far served him well. "Come on now," Lily said, as they descended the flight of stairs from the astronomy tower. Usually a hot spot for after-curfew activity, tonight it was deserted. "The main ingredients in a calming draught, list them?" Remus huffed as his hip clicked on the last stair. He was just glad he had a lot of energy shortly before the moon. Lacewing flies, dew from a field of clover, seawater and, Oh, come on, Remus, Lily sighed, exasperated. "This is fourth-year stuff." "I know, but I can never— Wait, did you hear that?" "What?" "Shh." He was sure he had heard a sigh or a gasp, and now, in the perfect silence, he was aware that he could hear 2 more heartbeats nearby, pounding hard, and the scent of something else, something exciting and heady. He ripped back the nearest tapestry, raising his wand. "Lumos! Shit! Mary!" Lily gasped. "Moony," Sirius said. "What are you two doing?" Lily said, immediately adopting her authoritative voice, which Remus thought was eerily close to McGonagall's. "Can't guess, Evans?" Sirius winked at her. His arms were still protectively wrapped around Mary's waist. His hair had fallen forward untidily, and his mouth was redder than usual. Mary's blouse was unbuttoned almost down to her navel, and she was hurriedly trying to cover up. "We ought to give you both detention." Lily raised an eyebrow at her friend. "Oh, be nice, Lily," Mary cajoled, a soft smile on her lips. "Everyone does it, just a bit of fun." "Well, as this is the first time," Lily relented. "Come on, we're heading back to the tower now anyway." 5 more minutes?" Sirius asked cheekily, much to Lily's horror. Mary laughed and slapped him playfully. "Bad boy," she giggled, buttoning up her shirt. "Come on, it's not like anything else was happening tonight." The 4 of them walked back to Gryffindor common room together, the girls giggling and whispering together, occasionally sneaking glances back at Sirius before bursting into giggles all over again. Sirius played up to this, walking with an exaggerated swagger, tucking his long hair behind one ear and winking at them when they looked. He tried to catch Remus's eye a few times, as if to let him in on the joke, but Remus kept looking forward and said nothing. "All right, Moony?" Sirius asked, when they were all in their beds and still had not spoken. He sounded a bit worried now. "Good," thought Remus. "Yeah," Remus replied, rolling over and closing his eyes. Chapter 84, 5th Year Hurt Feelings. Monday the 18th of January 1976. Remus Lupin had absolutely no interest whatsoever in the Forbidden Forest at any other time of the month. Care of magical creatures had given him a healthy respect for the beasts who lived there, and he was inclined to give them a wide berth. The wolf clearly felt otherwise. James and Sirius, or rather Prongs and Padfoot as they were now known, had very little trouble leading the werewolf out of the shack and into the green velvet darkness of the woods. Remus's memories of the full moons were much better than they ever had been, but still not quite human and therefore less complete. He remembered scents, shapes, noises, and even tastes, sometimes. "We can't stop you chasing rabbits if you want to chase rabbits," James shrugged when Remus woke up that morning distressed by the blood on his tongue. "You seemed pretty happy about it at the time." "It was bloody good fun," Sirius put in, licking his own lips. "You were encouraging me," Remus accused, pulling his trousers on underneath his blanket. "You ought to know better. You have self-control." "Yeah," Sirius shrugged, "but when I'm a dog, I'm a dog. It's what we do." That was Sirius all over. Have all the fun and take no responsibility. "Don't worry, Moony," James yawned. "We wouldn't ever let you hurt a person, and you did have fun, I promise." He didn't need James to tell him that. As much as the human Remus preferred to remain aloof and separate himself from those baser instincts the wolf represented, he couldn't wait for the next moon. "You'd better be off," he yawned back. "See if you can get a bit of kip before breakfast." "Yeah, all right," James nodded sleepily. "See ya, Moony." "Bye, Prongs." Prongs had been a stroke of genius one afternoon when Peter had forgotten the word for antlers. They'd all laughed so hard the name had stuck. Remus wasn't sure where Padfoot had come from. Likely a private joke between James and Sirius. Anyway, it made sense, and they had settled into their new names comfortably, sealing them into the Marauders' map. Madame Pumphrey gave him the once-over when he arrived, then just sent him on his way. "I don't even need the stretcher anymore," she marvelled, "and you've got a good colour in your cheeks." Rest this morning, but if you're feeling up to it, you may as well attend your afternoon lessons." He felt terrible for lying to her about the reason for his miraculous recoveries, but it couldn't be helped. Remus managed to sleep through the rest of the morning and awoke a bit too early for lunch. He went down to the common room to sit by an open window and smoke, while he went over his history notes for the afternoon. All things considered, he thought to himself, other than the Sirius problem, life was going pretty well. Sirius had bungled an apology about the astronomy tower incident. Remus heavily suspected this was a result of a conference with James. "Sorry, Mooney, I should have checked with you, or used the map or something. I know you hate all that girl stuff, and I know you've done loads to keep us out of trouble this year." Remus had put on a great show of mulling this apology over, then forgiving his friend, because anything else would have been highly suspicious. He was mortified when even Mary came to offer her own apology, and spluttered that he hadn't minded in the least. He liked Mary. He didn't want to feel this way about her. None of it was her fault exactly, and as James so often said, Sirius deserved a bit of fun, considering the year he was having. "Hiya, Remus." A small voice interrupted his thoughts. He realized he hadn't so much as glanced at his notes yet, and his cigarette had burnt all the way down, unsmoked. "Hi, Christopher," Remus nodded, frowning as he brushed the ash off his sleeve. "Yoke?" "Yeah." The younger boy grinned and hopped up to join him on the window seat. He was smaller than Remus, but so was everyone. "What are you up to?" "History," Remus said through his teeth as he lit another fag. "Cool." Christopher grinned. Remus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "I won't bother you then," Christopher said hopefully, "if you're busy." "What's up?" Remus asked, not wanting to hurt his feelings. There were enough hurt feelings in the world, and he refused to be responsible for anyone's but his own. Well, nothing really. It's a Hogsmeade weekend this weekend." "Yeah, I know." Remus shifted uncomfortably in the seat. Surely Christopher wouldn't be so gauche as to ask him out. He had to nip it in the bud at once. I'm going with my mates, you know." "Oh, right. James Potter and Sirius Black and that other one." He could tell that Christopher, like most of the younger Gryffindors, teetered between awe and fear where the Marauders were concerned. They were simply so daring and so successful it was intimidating. "Well, I was just thinking, that's all." Christopher cleared his throat. "You know how we were talking about that new arithmancy book? I thought we could see if anywhere was stocking it yet." "Sorry, Christopher," Remus said as gently as possible. "I really am busy. Maybe another time." "Okay, yeah, of course." Christopher looked crestfallen. Remus felt bad, but what else could he do? And he really did have plans. Not with the Marauders, actually. He had another phone call planned with Grant. After the incident with Sirius and Mary, Remus had hastily scribbled down a request to speak with Grant and sent it to Matron first thing the next morning. He somewhat regretted to now, having calmed down a fair bit, but was still looking forward to speaking with Grant if he could. "Hiya, Mooney!" Sirius came bounding across the common room from the portrait hole he just entered through. He leaned against the wall beside Remus and Christopher, grinning that Sirius Black grin. "Hi, Padfoot," Remus smiled back. He hoped he didn't look at Sirius the way Christopher looked at him. That would be embarrassing. "So, settle a bet for me and Prongs," Sirius began, completely ignoring Christopher, who got up and mumbled a goodbye before making a hasty exit. Sirius wasted no time in flinging himself into the empty space on the window seat. "How many nifflers would we need to find Rowena Ravenclaw's lost diadem?" "What the fuck is a diadem?" Remus smirked. "Like a crown." Sirius snatched Remus's newly lit cigarette and held it to his own lips. Remus had to struggle not to moan at the sight. He simply took out a third cigarette. "Why," he said, inhaling deeply, "would you and James want a crown?" "Dunno," Sirius shrugged. "Finding treasure seems like a marauder-type pursuit. Hey, what did that kid want?" "Christopher." "Ah, he in your fan club. Study group." "Pfft. What did he want?" "He was asking me out," Remus replied dryly, looking out of the window, apparently not dryly enough. When he looked back at Sirius, his mouth was agape. Oh God, Sirius's mouth. "Joking, Padfoot." Remus said with a smirk. He had perfected sarcastic smirks. Sirius snorted. Good one, Mooney. Thought you were serious there. Remus considered saying, No, you're Sirius's, but that joke had been wearing thin since first year and would only earn him a punch in the arm. He settled for a shrug and another pull on his fag. If you did fancy going out with someone, though, Sirius said slyly. Who do you reckon, Lily or Marlene? Shut up, Remus rolled his eyes. You're right, Sirius continued conversationally. Lily's taken. I mean, she doesn't know she's taken, of course, so Marlene it is. Hogsmeade on Saturday? Are you asking me out on Marlene's behalf? Maybe. No, I can get her to ask you out herself if you want. I just thought you'd say yes to me. I'd say yes to you, Remus thought pathetically. Marlene's not interested in me, he said. This, he had decided, was better than saying, I'm not interested in her, because, of course, that would only invite the question, why not? Course she is. You're friends, aren't you? Anyway, you have to come. We're doing it to support James. Now James is involved. Remus stubbed out his cigarette and stood up, shoving his history notes into his bag. They obviously weren't getting read now. Lunch, he said. Yep. Sirius nodded, flicked his own cigarette out of the window, and stood up. They headed for the portrait hole. Yes, James is involved, Sirius continued as they made their way to the Great Hall. We all need to be there, and ideally coupled up, so that he can ask Evans out. James asks Lily out once a week. True, Sirius nodded, but this time he's going in with a game plan. Oh? He's got a song and everything. James writes songs? Remus's mask dropped for a moment in genuine surprise. Well, Sirius licked his lips. I may have given him a hand. Anyway, we all need to have dates to plant the idea in her mind, like that muggle psychology stuff. As much as I'd love to see James make a prat out of himself in the name of true love, Remus laughed. I'm busy on Saturday. Doing what? None of your business. See, Mooney, Sirius sighed. This is why the girls can't get enough of you, so mysterious. Remus wasn't sure if Sirius was making a cruel joke, so he left it there. They walked quietly for a little bit. Hey, Mooney? Sirius started again. Yes? Do you fancy Mary? What? They had stopped just outside the lunch hall, and Remus spun around to face Sirius in shock. Sirius looked embarrassed, fiddled with his earring. Well, you've been a bit off since we started going out, and I've hardly seen you since the tapestry fiasco. Remus snorted. No, I do not fancy Mary. Okay, good. Sirius smiled at him. So you'll be Marlene's date? Still busy, sorry. Saturday, the 31st of January, 1976. Remembering that the last time he had tried to have a private phone call he had been followed, Remus asked to borrow James's cloak for their trip into Hogsmeade. Good old James. You could rely on him not to ask loads of questions, especially when he was distracted by his nerves over asking Lily out. Yeah, course, Mooney. Course? He murmured, staring at himself in the mirror. It's under the bed. Hey, would you say my hair needs trimming? Looks a bit untidy. It does look untidy, Remus said from under the bed, but a trim won't help. Don't worry, girls think it's charming. Yeah, you're right. You've asked her out before, Remus said, emerging with the cloak and brushing the dust from his robes. How can you be nervous? Because I'm bloody mad about her, James replied without missing a beat. You know when you just can't get 'em out of your mind, and in your head it's great, and everything's going the way you want, but then they're there in front of you, and, well, it all goes to shit because she's just so much more spectacular in real life, you know? Yeah, Remus murmured, thumbing the fabric of the invisibility cloak as Sirius exited the bathroom. Down in the village, Remus wished James good luck before disappearing into the gents at the Three Broomsticks, throwing on the cloak and then walking straight out again. This time he was able to arrive at the old Muggle phone box at exactly the right time and excitedly keyed in the number. Oi, oi, Happy New Year and all that, Grant's voice rattled up the wire. Remus beamed. Happy New Year. I had a card for you, but I never sent it, sorry. So long as you remember my birthday. Oh, okay, when is it? Grant barked with laughter. I'm joking, you silly sod. I never sent you no card either. Oh, Still taking yourself too seriously, then? Yeah, Remus chuckled. I suppose. How are you? Shit, Grant replied, his voice going slightly high as he inhaled. Remus guessed he was smoking. Bloody terrible, actually. But don't you worry. My problem. No, tell me. Go on. I might be able to help. Just matron. Don't worry. Hey, how are things with your posho lover boy? Over it yet? No, Remus sighed. Worse, if anything. Yeah, thought as much. You said it wouldn't last. Lied to make you feel better. Remus couldn't help but laugh. Thank God for Grant. I feel like I'm going mad, he said, whispering into the phone the secrets he hadn't been able to say out loud. I feel like I'm just going to do something crazy. He's so... Be careful, Grant warned. Remember what I said. Yeah, Remus sighed again. So, how was your Christmas? Crap. I was supposed to go to meet Gran's, but Grandad cancelled it at the last minute. Didn't want his Nancy boy grandson showing him up in front of the neighbours. Next time I see him, I'll wear a dress. Sorry, Grant, Remus said quietly, feeling even worse about not having sent the card. Oh, shut up, Grant replied, and Remus could tell he was smiling. Like I said, not your problem. Oi, I might not be here much longer, though. I'm probably going to be moved on. Haven't exactly been going to school. Where will you go? Dunno, think I'm done with Ohms. Might go up London, got some mates there. How will I find you? Bless you. Grant said, forgot how sweet you was. You could give me your address and I'll do my best to write. I can't. Remus felt a horrible tearing on the inside. I'm really sorry. I wish I could. I really do. My school isn't really a normal sort of school and, well, it's not really possible. Well, that's that then, Grant replied. Remus trudged back to the village with a heavy heart. All that obsessing over Sirius had come to nothing, and now he was at risk of losing someone just as important. Someone who actually fancied him back too. Apparently, Remus was only interested in people he couldn't have. He would look up locating spells as soon as possible, he decided. He wasn't going to lose track of Grant like that. He was mildly cheered upon entering the Three Broomsticks to see Snape sitting in a corner, alone, glaring about the room. Remus went straight back into the gents, removed the cloak, and then walked out, being sure to catch Severus's eye. The Slytherin boy nearly fell off his bar stool in surprise. Remus smirked as he walked over to join his friends. They were all there, Peter and Desdemona, Sirius and Mary, Marlene, James and Lily. Lily looked very pink in the face, but very smug, and James was looking at the bottom of his empty glass. He was dripping wet and smelled sickly sweet. Evidently the serenade had not gone down well. Moony, Sirius boomed invitingly, you missed all the fun. Yeah, sorry, Remus smiled at everyone politely, pulling out his own chair. Sirius motioned to the pretty barmaid for another butterbeer. Remus glanced at James, then Lily. How is everyone? Peter let out a strange, high-pitched giggle, then clamped his hand over his mouth. Sirius raised an eyebrow. Oh, quite well, Moony, quite well. I was just saying, it's been a while since the Marauders have done a proper prank. You put stink bombs under the rug in the Slytherin common room last week, Lily said. And yesterday you reversed the lenses on all of the telescopes in the astronomy tower, Marlene said. And you said that tomorrow you were planning to... Mary started, but Sirius rolled his eyes. Yeah, but those things are child's play, he said decidedly. Plus, that was just me and James mucking about. A proper marauder prank needs all four of us. Remus doesn't want to join in with your silly pranks, Lily said. Yes, I do, Remus replied, partly because he was in a bad mood and felt contrary, partly out of solidarity for poor James, who still had butterbeer dripping from the end of his nose. Chapter 85, 5th year, dung bombs and broom cupboards. She's like a live bombshell, like a flash out of hell, and when she's shaking her, everyone fell, at her feet, and that's neat. And she took me completely by surprise with her ultrasonic eyes that were flashing like hysterical danger signs, that said to beware where you tread, or you'll go out of your head. Look out, She's a Hellraiser, Star Chaser, Trailblazer, natural-born raver. Yeah. She's a Hellraiser, Star Chaser, Trailblazer, natural-born raver. Yeah. Look out. Monday the 23rd of February, 1976. It was a simple enough prank to begin with, good old-fashioned dung bombs, but Sirius's high spirits at the prospect of all four Marauders working together again meant that the idea kept growing and expanding until it somehow involved 400 dung bombs, a timing delay spell, and all four of them out of bed after curfew. They'd put it off long enough. Even if Remus agreed to forego his homework for an evening, they had to gather the materials. He didn't ask where they got their hands on 400 dung bombs, best not to know, and then contend with Quidditch practice and the prefect patrol rota. Then there was a full moon. All told, the first night all of them were available ended up being at the end of February. Been a while. James grinned as he disappeared under the cloak. Peter's ability to turn into a rat was incredibly useful, especially when he could shrink down and rest on James's shoulder under the invisibility cloak. Unfortunately, tall as they all were now, 3 was still too many to properly fit. You two used the cloak, Remus sighed, pulling it off after trying to squat low enough so that it didn't show their ankles. I'll just flash my prefect pin if anyone asks what I'm doing. Takes all the fun out of it, though, Sirius complained, slightly muffled under the fabric. I'm sure you'll still find a way to have fun, Remus said. Come on, then. They left the dorm room and made their way down the stairs to leave Gryffindor Tower. Remus had to walk slowly so that the others could keep up, but he was anxious to get it over with. It was a good idea and everything, but it was going to take most of the night if they wanted all of their bases covered, and he had an early start on Tuesday. Hiya, Remus. No sooner had they turned a corner than they had bumped into Christopher. This was getting ridiculous. Everywhere he turned, if Snape wasn't watching him, then Christopher was. Remus steeled himself and smiled broadly, deeply conscious that the 3 Marauders stood just behind him, invisible. Hi, Christopher, how's it going? Not bad, the delighted boy chirped back. I was just going to the common room. Fancy a game of chess? Sorry, I'm on patrol. Remus tapped his metal badge. Oh, right. Where's Lily, then? In the loo, he said quickly. I'm just waiting for her. I'll wait with you, Christopher grinned. Remus fought the urge to slap his forehead in disbelief. Oh, no, he laughed, trying to keep his tone friendly. No, you go off to the common room. It's nearly curfew. I don't want to have to give you detention. Oh, okay then. Christopher nodded. Remus only ever disappointed him. See you later, maybe? I forgot to say, I'm so excited about your party. My what? There was a low groan of annoyance just behind Remus. Fortunately, Christopher didn't seem to hear it. Your birthday party. I can't wait. I couldn't come to Sirius Black's party in November. I had a potions essay due, but this year I'll make sure to get everything out of the way first. Terrific, Remus replied, giving him a thumbs up. Just go away, for God's sake. See you there, then. Christopher bounced off quite happily. Remus smirked and turned to the invisible boys over his shoulder. My party, eh? It was supposed to be a surprise, James whispered. Who is that little git anyway? Sirius asked. Leave him alone, Remus tutted. He's just friendly. Such a benevolent professor, James laughed. He'll be bringing you apples next. Well, one of you should tell him I prefer chocolate then, Remus replied breezily as they made their way further along the hallway. They distributed the dung bombs as quickly as they could, and Remus performed the timing delay incantation, something he had been playing around with for a while. The key was making sure the dung bombs were scattered equally throughout the castle in order to cause maximum chaos. I've spaced the times out at hourly intervals, Remus explained quietly. I reckon it should take Filch about an hour to clear away the first lot, so as soon as he's finished, the second lot will go off, then the third. We'll never make fun of you again, Moony, Sirius promised, you bloody legend. Yeah, well, as long as no one knows it was me. He laughed. I've got my reputation to think of. Ooh, yeah, can't have little Christopher finding out his hero is a bad boy, can we? Remus elbowed him sharply in the side. Hurry up, Peter, now human, said, wringing his hands. I promised I'd try and say goodnight to Desi before curfew. Can we do the Ravenclaw floor next? Ah, young love, James chuckled. Giving your girlfriend a goodnight kiss as your friends booby-trap her exit points? She thinks it's funny. Peter shrugged, slightly pink. Oi, Pete, how far have you got with Desdemona anyway? Sirius asked brusquely. Peter blinked wildly a few times. He was not used to being so addressed by Sirius, who had lately been asking him all sorts of questions since beginning his relationship with Mary. Remus had the idea that Sirius saw it all as an extension of the snogging competition. What do you mean? You know, Sirius continued, juggling a few dung bombs carelessly, over the clothes or under the clothes, above the waist or below the... Nothing like that. Peter was bright red now, and it's none of your business anyway. Oh, go on, I'll tell you how far I've got with MacDonald. I don't want to know... She's let me feel up her... Okay, finished, Remus said loudly. Next stop, Ravenclaw. It took them almost another hour, and it was well past curfew by the time they had finished everything. In hindsight, James yawned, we should have started laying them further from the common room and worked our way back. Remus nodded drowsily. We did it, though, Sirius cheered. The Marauders are back. We never went anywhere, Peter muttered. He was still annoyed for having been put on the spot earlier. They were over halfway back when Remus caught Mrs. Norris's scent. He shushed the others, and Peter quickly transformed into a rat, more out of nervousness than anything. James was just raising the cloak to cover them all when the cat appeared, mewing disdainfully at them. Sirius, still full of energy, winked at James. "Watch this!" and turned into a dog. He barked 3 times, and Mrs. Norris turned tail and ran. Sirius turned back, laughing hysterically. "Who's there?" Filch's voice echoed around the same corner. "You've done it now," Remus moaned. "You idiot!" "Run," James said, and set off at full pelt towards the common room, Peter squeaking behind him. Remus tried to keep up, but his hip wouldn't allow it, and he was soon out of breath. Sirius hung back with him, much to his annoyance. "Go," he panted, waving a hand at Sirius. "I might not get in trouble, but you will. Don't slow down." "Nonsense, Moony," Sirius said, looking around quickly. His face lit up. "In here!" Sirius grabbed Remus by the wrist and yanked him into a nearby broom cupboard, closing the door as quietly as possible. "Perfect," Remus hissed, annoyed, snatching back his hand. "Now, if we get caught, they'll know we were up to something." "Oh, relax, will you?" Sirius retorted. "The worst we'll get is detention. You used to get loads of detentions. You used to be fun." "Well, I'm sorry if my idea of fun doesn't involve spending all night stuck in a cupboard with you," Remus whispered back hotly. It was dark, and he knew Sirius couldn't see him as well as Remus could see Sirius. "Lumos," Sirius whispered, lighting his wand point and rummaging in his pocket. There wasn't much room, and he kept jostling into Remus's hip. "What are you doing now?" Remus snapped, trying to edge away as much as possible. Why couldn't he have ended up trapped with James? Or Peter? Peter would have been perfect. "Calm your tits," Sirius grunted. "I've got the map. Hang on. Aha!" He withdrew the blank parchment from his back pocket and tapped it with his wand. "I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good." "Nothing." Sirius cleared his throat. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. Moony, it's broken. Or that's just a bit of old parchment and someone else has the map," Remus suggested. "Potter, I'll bloody kill him." "No, it's good," Remus said, thinking fast. "If James has it, then he can find us, or at least he knows where we are." "Oh, yeah, I suppose you're right. Think we should wait, then?" "Well, since you've put us in a corner, I don't think we have a choice." Sirius sighed heavily. Remus felt his breath against his collarbone. He tried to twist away again, feeling an alarming tightening in his trousers. "Godric," Sirius huffed, "what is your problem?" "What?" Remus reacted, surprised. "You've been dragging your heels about this prank for ages, avoiding me and James since Christmas." "I've been revising, and you've had Quidditch. We're not 12 anymore. We can't spend all our time together." "Seem to spend plenty of time with Evans. We're prefects together. She helps me with potions." "And the mood?" "What mood?" You've been grumpy all year." Remus was pretty miffed to be called a moody by Gryffindor's resident drama queen, but he held his tongue. It was no good getting into a fight, not when you were so close your knees were knocking together. "It's nothing. Exam stress." "I don't believe you," Sirius said defiantly. His wand had gone out, but he was looking right at Remus. Maybe he could see in the dark. Dogs could, couldn't they? His eyes burned like filaments. "Something's wrong, Mooney. Tell me." "Nothing's wrong. Leave it alone, will you?" "Okay," Sirius replied, his voice softer now, less aggressive. "Okay, but I wish you'd tell me. You used to tell me your secrets." "Look, this isn't the time," Remus whispered, closing his eyes and turning his head away. "We're about to get caught out of bed and probably get a month of detentions. We need to be quiet." He felt Sirius nod, and they said no more. He could come up with an excuse, Remus thought, for the mood. If exam stress didn't work, then maybe mention the war. The Marauders hadn't really discussed it in detail, and it was on Remus's mind, so he hoped that was more believable. But he didn't want to remind Sirius after everything he'd already been through. He had considered mentioning his Snape problem, but was equally concerned about Sirius's reaction to that. He'd been getting in enough trouble lately, and Remus didn't want anyone going after Severus on his account. He'd deal with that himself. Some nights when he couldn't sleep, Remus had even mulled over the possibility of claiming he did have a crush on Mary. He was sure that Sirius would be understanding, and it seemed like an easy way out. Or else he could pretend Grant was a girl and tell them all about that. He had decided not to, and felt guilt for even coming up with the idea. It was dishonest at best and disrespectful at worst, even if Grant never found out. There was nothing to do but wait for it to pass. God, it was warm, squashed up in a cupboard like that. Remus did everything he could to keep his back pressed hard against the wall. There was barely any room at all. If Sirius so much as stepped forward an inch, they would be touching. And if, horror of horrors, they came into contact anywhere below the waist, he would find out that Remus was stiff as a rod. It was torture. "Mooney?" Sirius whispered, so quietly Remus thought he might have imagined it. But he was looking up at him, a strange look on his face. "Are you—" Suddenly, blessedly, the door swung open to reveal James grinning at them, Wormtail on his shoulder. "Having fun, lads?" Remus could have kissed him. "Our hero," he smiled weakly. Chapter 86, 5th year, Suite 16, Tuesday the 9th of March, 1976. It was a miracle of epic proportions that none of them were caught, and even more miraculous that their prank went off without a hitch the next day, resulting in a morning off lessons while Filch dealt with the terrible stench. The rest of the classes took place outside on the grounds in the early spring sunshine, which, as far as the Marauders were concerned, was a win. Additionally, Sirius could barely contain his glee when they all returned to their common rooms that evening to find a notice pinned to the corkboard, reminding students that dogs were not on the approved list for pets at Hogwarts. This caused a huge amount of confusion among the rest of the student populace, of course. "I've never seen a dog. Who's got a dog?" "If one of the Slytherins got a dog in, then I want to bring my rabbit from home." "I think I have seen one in the grounds, actually. Maybe it's a stray." Needless to say, Sirius and James were in their element. "I'll sniff him out," Sirius announced. "I bet he's right under our noses," James laughed. "Could be closer than we think." Remus laughed too, trying to mask his unease. Sirius had so far said nothing about the half an hour in that broom cupboard. Remus could only assume that, either A. Sirius had not found anything out of the ordinary, and in fact Remus was once again overthinking things, likely, or B. Sirius now knew everything about Remus, his darkest desires and deepest secrets, and preferred not to address it because the whole thing was just too embarrassing, less likely but more frightening. At any rate, Remus threw himself into his schoolwork, his prefect duties, and generally being a model student. This at least ensured that he was out of Sirius's way. Sirius had evidently decided to do the complete opposite. He had never exactly been the best at following rules, of course, but even James admitted that this year Sirius appeared to be attempting some kind of record. He was in detention almost every night, rarely completed his homework, even though he could do it with one arm tied behind his back if he wanted to, and split the rest of his time between making mischief and seeing how far he could get his tongue down Mary MacDonald's throat. Not that Mary seemed to mind much. That was fine. That was just as it should be. It wasn't easy, though. As much of a relief it was to be away from the one person that he couldn't be sensible around. Remus also found it very distressing to be away from the one person he couldn't be sensible around. Marlene and Lily were lovely. They were kind and funny and clever and generous, but they were a poor substitute for the Marauders. He even tried spending a bit more time talking to Christopher, asking him questions about home or the music he liked. It was worse than he'd expected. Christopher was a pure-blood wizard who didn't know any Muggle music and didn't appear to be that interested in hearing any. On top of that, he had realized his error in spoiling Remus's birthday surprise and wouldn't stop apologizing, which was incredibly annoying. Remus had already promised James that he would act surprised when the party was unveiled in his honor. He'd tried to talk them all out of it, of course, but he'd been pleading for moderation since first year and knew he wasn't likely to get it. "Don't make a fuss on my account," he said at dinner the morning before. "Lily will go mental—" "Wrong," James said smugly. "Lily sent out half the invitations." "Invitations?" "Yeah, we've had a lot of interest. Considered charging entry, actually," Sirius explained, eyes twinkling across the table. Remus looked at his food quickly. He had decided not to make eye contact with Sirius ever again. It would not be easy, but it was the only way. Of this, he was convinced. "Your little library gang wanted to come," James continued, "and they're not all Gryffindors, so we had to open it up to other houses. Then there's this weird group of seventh years who said you're a total legend. No idea what that's about. Have you got a secret double life or something, Mooney?" Remus shrugged. He still had some students asking for cigarettes, though he didn't sell them anymore. He usually didn't mind lending fags, though, as long as they were eventually repaid. "Well, anyway," James pushed his glasses up his nose, "you simply have too many fans, Mooney, and we can't let them all down at short notice, can we?" "Fine. No drinking, though." Remus sighed. "It's a school night." Wednesday, the 10th of March, 1976. It rained the morning of Remus's birthday, but he couldn't have cared less. He woke up to a pile of presents from the Potters, all sorts of lovely things like sweets and a home-baked birthday cake, plus a fine leather-bound notebook and matching quill. There were cards from everybody, including one from Professor Ferox, which made Remus blush from top to bottom. At breakfast, the Marauders conducted almost the entire school in a rendition of Happy Birthday, which ended up running to 5 encores before Remus attempted to crawl under the table to escape it. The Slytherins scowled, stony-faced, and in a fit of birthday joie de vivre, Remus actually stuck his tongue out at Snape. The Marauders then piled his plate high with a slice of toast for each available topping and handed over their own gifts. Sirius and James were in their Quidditch robes, ready for an early morning practice before lessons. "Do we have to, Potter?" Marlene whined, looking up at the enchanted ceiling, which was grey and drizzly. "Yes, if we want that cup," James asserted, pouring her another mug of coffee. "And again, after last bell, before the— you know what." He winked at Marlene so elaborately that Remus almost burst out laughing. "Smooth, Potter." Marlene raised an eyebrow. "Right, I've got to get to the library," Mary said brightly, climbing up off of Sirius's lap. "Got to hand that divination book back before Pince calls to have me hung, drawn and quartered." "See you after second Quidditch?" Sirius asked, still holding Mary at the hips. "Nah," she shook her head, ringlets bouncing. "I'm really behind on history. Thought I'd drop in on one of Remus's classes." "Study sessions," Remus corrected quickly, careful not to look at the couple for too long. "Whatever you say, Professor Lupin," she grinned at him cheekily. "Oi!" Sirius tugged at her to reclaim her attention. "I thought you were going to sit in the Quidditch stands and do your homework." "Well, I said I might," Mary squirmed free, "but it's bloomin' freezing out today, and Remus is really good at explaining—" "Fine," Sirius said angrily, tossing his hair and crossing his arms. "Do whatever you like, I don't care." "Oi, don't start with me, Mr. Black." Mary frowned. "You'll lose, I promise." Sirius did not look up. Mary put a hand on her hip. "Kiss me goodbye, then." Sirius didn't move. Mary's face darkened. "Fine," she snapped, with a little stamp of her foot. "I'll see you when I bloody well see you," and marched off. Everyone else at the table glanced around awkwardly, and now Remus was not the only one avoiding Sirius's eye. Fortunately, Sirius was, for once, in tune with the feelings of others and stood up. "See you on the pitch," he muttered to James as he stalked out of the room, red robes swishing behind him. "Well," Marlene said, "can't wait to hear about that for the next 2 weeks. Hope they make up soon." Everyone at the table agreed. "The thing is," Mary said to Remus later on that evening, as she painted her fingernails a dark, wicked shade of red, "Sirius and I just both have such fiery personalities, you know. In Witch Weekly it says that means our relationship is very passionate." Remus replied, trying to tune it out as he very purposefully began drawing out lines for his astronomy chart. "And obviously passion is really good in a relationship," she continued, blowing on her fingernails. "I mean, it's really good, that side of things." She smiled to herself in that awful, smug, satisfied, happy way she always did when talking about Sirius. "But he needs to learn that I have my own life, you know. I mean, it's the 70s. "Yeah, great," Remus nodded, not looking up. "Remus?" Christopher appeared at his side. "Are you doing a star chart? Can I watch?" "I'm really not that great at astronomy, Chris," Remus replied, trying to concentrate on his lines. "You're better off just reading the textbook." "Oh no, I bet you're great. I'm really not." "Remus," Mary said, leaning over the desk, jogging his ruler and smearing the tiniest fleck of red nail polish onto his parchment. "Are you listening to me? I asked if you know why Sirius—" Lupin! A third year came running out of the portrait hole. "I lost your notes on unicorns. I'm really sorry, but—" "Hiya, Lupin, can I bum a fag?" A sixth year appeared. Remus screwed up his face. A dull pain had started up behind his eyes. "Just, can everybody please be quiet?" he said, much more brusquely than he meant to. He looked up and saw everyone staring at him, slightly wide-eyed. I've got a headache. I'm going for a lie-down." He got up. "Ooh," Mary said, standing up too. "You can't. Sorry, Remus, but the lads are up there planning, She bit her lip. "I was supposed to keep you down here." Remus took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll go to the hospital wing then." He refused all offers to escort him, hurrying as quickly as possible, skull throbbing sickly with every step. It was no good. He would have to start being rude to people, for the sake of his own sanity, if nothing else. Since when had he become everyone's best friend anyway? Wasn't he just the same scrawny, mean, care-home brat he'd always been? The cool quiet of the sick bay was so soothing, Remus could have burst into tears. As much as he usually felt very much at home in the warm red glow of the Gryffindor common room, it was in the still soft greys of the hospital wing where Remus first remembered feeling truly peaceful at Hogwarts. He stood there enjoying it for a moment, eyes closed. If he could just stay here all night. "Hello, Remus dear," Madame Pumphrey smiled, coming out of her office. "Everything all right?" Oh no. He really was going to cry. He swallowed helplessly and raised a fist to his forehead. "Remus!" The nurse came over a little quicker, her brow creasing with concern. She was still just a bit taller than him, but they were eye to eye, pretty much. "Sorry," he gasped, his voice tight and strange as he fought back tears. I've got a headache." "Sit down," Madame Pumphrey said gently, motioning to the nearest armchair by an unoccupied bed. "I've just the thing." She summoned a little pewter vial from her office. It flew into her palm, and she uncorked it and gave it to him. "Have 2 good glugs of that. Don't worry, it's nice and sweet." Her eye twinkled a little. Remus downed the potion and felt all of the tension and pain leave his neck and head at once, like water washing away. "Thanks." He ducked his head. His voice was still thick. "Sorry, bit of an overreaction." "Dear Remus," Madame Pumphrey clucked, "I've known you for 5 years now, and not once have you ever overreacted. Are you sure you're all right?" "Yeah, better now, thanks." "I mean, in general?" she pressed. "I've heard you've been burning the candle at both ends, doing long hours in the library, and you have your prefect duties and your health." "I'm fine." Remus rubbed his eyes fiercely. "Honestly, maybe just tired. I'll go to bed now." "Happy birthday, Remus," the Mediwitch said as he got up to leave. "Cheers," he nodded politely. But then she did something very strange. She reached out and hugged him, very tightly and not for very long. It was lovely. "Take care of yourself," she said as he left. He walked back slowly and wished he had an invisibility cloak for it. He could do without Severus following him or having to break up a hexing match between two very inept first years. When he finally reached the portrait hole up to Gryffindor Tower, he really did fancy an early night, but of course the Marauders had other plans. "Happy birthday, Remus!" The entire common room exploded as soon as he appeared. They'd done an incredible job. There were streamers hanging from every rafter, portrait and picture rail and confetti liberally sprinkled over everything else. Students and friends of Remus's from every house and year group grinned back at him, a flock of real live fairies fluttering over their heads. The tables were laden with sandwiches, cakes, pasties and pastries, as well as a huge bowl of very suspicious-looking punch. He smiled as widely as he could as he entered the room. "Oh my God," he said, hoping he was doing a good surprised face. "You lot are crazy." They laughed and eagerly ushered him into the room, where he found himself surrounded by cheers and pats on the back and birthday wishes. The record player began to blare, and Remus's 16th birthday party began in earnest. "I think this is bigger than Sirius's party," James said, handing Remus a cup of the purplish-looking punch. "Don't tell him I said that, though." "I don't know why all these people are here," Remus replied, staring around amazed. Everyone from every one of his classes, his study group, some people he'd only spoken to a few times before. "Because you're Mooney, obviously, the acceptable face of the Marauders," James nudged him. "Wow, look at Evans." Lily did look lovely, in a deep maroon mini-skirt and high wedge sandals. She was dancing with Marlene and Mary in a little group of three, laughing and raising her hands above her head. "Please tell me someone's confiscated your broom tonight," Remus said to James, who laughed good-naturedly. "Don't worry, I'm not planning to get that drunk again any time soon. I'm going to try playing hard to get tonight." "She'll appreciate that," Remus replied. He scanned the room for Sirius, who seemed to be missing. There was Peter, cozied up in an armchair with Desdemona. There was Christopher, having a very earnest conversation with a third-year Ravenclaw girl, occasionally glancing up to smile at Remus. The rest of the Gryffindor Quidditch team were huddled around the punch, challenging each other to down stronger and stronger measures. No Sirius. James must have seen him looking. "He's moping somewhere, over Mary," he explained. "I told him if he can't cheer the fuck up, then he's not to come down here, bringing everyone else down. I've taken him a few drinks up, but it's not working." "Oh, right. Still haven't made up, then?" Remus watched Mary, still dancing, who had caught the eye of almost every boy in the room. "Doesn't look like it. I thought maybe tough love would help, but I'm not as good at it as you. So he's sulking. Don't mind him, though. Mooney, enjoy your party." He did try to. The cake Mrs. Potter had sent was glorious heavy, rich chocolate with white icing and multicoloured hundreds and thousands. The candles were enchanted to burn all evening without dripping wax, and only went out for a few moments after Remus blew on them. He did not dance, though Marlene and Lily tried to drag him up a few times, but he did mingle, thanking people for coming and having quite a nice chat with the seventh years about which newts to take. "You should be a teacher," one of them said, which Remus thought was very kind, but completely insane. It must have been getting close to midnight when he patted his back pocket for his pack of cigarettes and found them missing. Sighing, he considered leaving it, but he had had enough to drink now and just really wanted a smoke more than anything. There was still a box in the bottom of his trunk if Sirius hadn't pinched them. He decided to go and look. Halfway up the stairs, he bumped into James again. "Sorry, Mooney," the black-haired boy said, looking a bit drunk and a bit annoyed. "He's coming down now." Remus looked over James's shoulder to see a sullen-faced Sirius following him down the stairs. "Not going to bed, are you?" James asked. "No," Remus shook his head, almost struck dumb. "Fags." "Filthy habit," James said with a wonky smirk. He glanced over his shoulder. "Come on then, Black." "Just a sec," Sirius said, looking at Remus. "I just want to say happy birthday to Mooney." "Fine, but hurry up," James said, slurring. "Remus, tell him to swallow his stupid bloody pride and get down there and snog Mary, eh?" Okay, Prongs. James pushed the door open, and for a few seconds light and noise invaded the staircase before muting again as he closed the door behind him. Sirius and Remus were alone. "Happy birthday, Moony," Sirius said, coming down a few steps to stand level with Remus. "Cheers," Remus smiled, as casually as he could. You okay?" "Yeah, fine," Sirius said, though it was clearly a lie. He was fiddling with an empty cup. "Sorry if I ruined your party." "You didn't. It's been great." "Good. Quiet." Sirius looked down, then up at Remus again. "James reckons I need to be the one to go and make up with Mary. Probably a good idea." "You think so?" "Well, yeah." Remus was confused. You like Mary, I thought." Sirius shrugged, looking at Remus again, his eyes dark blue, flecked with sharp, icy silver. His lips were shiny and red from drinking, and he had that slightly petulant look he got when he wasn't smiling. Remus almost wanted to look away, he was so gorgeous. It couldn't be right staring at each other like that. It couldn't possibly end well. "I do like Mary," Sirius said, leaning forward slightly. Remus could feel his breath on his skin. "So go and snog her then, silly prat," Remus said hurriedly, trying to step back but bumping against the wall behind him. It really was such a stupidly narrow stairway, like the broom cupboard all over again. "I will," Sirius said, biting his lip slightly. "Oh God," Remus thought. "I will in a minute." Remus swallowed. "Have you ever kissed anyone, Remus?" "No, you know I haven't." The lie came easily now. Sirius nodded, looking at him again, that forward knowing look. "It's really not as scary as you think it is," Sirius said. Remus couldn't bear it. He might never know what came over him in that moment. It was all just too much, and he grabbed the back of the other boy's neck and pulled him forward, pressing his lips hard against Sirius's. It was terrifying and amazing, even more so when Sirius began kissing him back, opening his lips and allowing Remus to slide his tongue inside. It was all at once startling, incredible, and familiar. He couldn't think, as if every transmitter in his brain had short-circuited at once, fizzing and popping, sending off sparks. Yes was the only coherent thought he had. Yes, 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 yes. They came to their senses simultaneously, both pulling away. Remus snatched back his hand. Sirius stared at him, wide-eyed. Remus looked away first. "I'd better—" Sirius started back towards the common room. "Yeah, I was just—" Remus backed away, up the stairs. Sirius disappeared back towards the party, and Remus exhaled deeply, feeling he might sink to the floor. He ran his fingers through his hair and wiped his mouth. He rubbed his eyes and fought the urge to punch the wall. What had he been playing at? Sirius would think he was completely mad or worse. He'd never done anything like that before. Maybe he was mad. He had to say sorry. He had to make it right before Sirius told James, before they all knew. Remus straightened his shirt and headed down the stairs, hoping to catch up with Sirius to apologize, to somehow explain. He re-entered the common room, still vibrant with light and music, and saw something that made him stop still. He shrank back, unable to look away. Sirius was snogging Mary. He had her pushed up against the marble mantelpiece, and she looked like she was pushing back against him with equal ferocity, their bodies pressed together, heads bobbing. Her arms were slung around his neck, her thin, dark fingers curling in his hair. Everyone cheered and hooted merrily. Remus turned on his heel and marched straight back to the tower. He ignored James and Peter, who were planning to head to the kitchens for more supplies. He just shook his head, mute, and carried on up the stairs to their bedroom. He drew the curtains around his bed closed and lay down, feeling strange. He covered his face with his arms and thought about the two of them together. He thought about Sirius's eyes and the curve of Mary's hips until he fell into a fitful sleep. Chapter 87, 5th year, morning after, Thursday the 11th of March, 1976. Hello, Grant. Watcher Remus, how are you? How am I? How are you, you silly twat? You're the one having a made-up conversation with me. Yeah, sorry about that. It's okay, I'm not busy. I'm not even real. You are real, I just can't talk to you in real life. I don't know where you are, even. Nothing I can do about that. What's up? I kissed Sirius. Bloody hell. What should I do? How should I know? Didn't I tell you not to? Yeah, but he kissed me back. For a minute, at least. Sure you're not just imagining that? Yeah, Remus gave up at that point. He had been lying awake in bed since at least 5 o'clock in the morning, alternately panicking and soaring with joy. He had to be mad, mental, crazy, bonkers, lost it. He'd thought that talking to someone else might help, but who could you talk to that early in the morning, especially when it concerned a secret which could very well get you expelled for all Remus knew? Unable to find a solution by talking to an imaginary person, or at least an imagined version of a real person, he returned to his previous, somewhat less constructive diversion, trying to relive the 3 minutes on the staircase with Sirius last night without reliving the part where they both ran away from each other. Did he regret it? It was too soon to tell. On the one hand, Remus might well have just ruined the best friendship he had ever had, or ever would have. On the other hand, it had been a bloody good snog. In Remus's limited experience, he thought it probably made sense that just because you really madly fancied someone, it didn't mean that when you finally kissed them, it would be as good as you'd imagined. And Remus knew he had a very vivid imagination sometimes, but Sirius was Sirius. It had been anything but disappointing. It had been perfect, in fact. As long as you pretended that last part hadn't happened. Stifling a groan, he scolded himself and tried to think rationally. Approach it like an essay, he thought. Lay out all the facts, then make your argument. So, the facts. A. Remus Lupin had kissed Sirius Black full on the lips. B. Sirius Black had not immediately thrown a punch. C. Sirius Black had actually kissed Remus Lupin back, despite what the imaginary Grant had to say. D. Sirius Black had also kissed Mary MacDonald immediately afterwards and with considerable vigour. E. Sirius Black had not come to bed at all. Bollocks, shitting, buggering bollocks. Remus climbed out of bed. It was no good lying there, tossing and turning. He had to get out of the tower. Sirius's bed lay empty to his left. If he wasn't in it, then he was most likely in the common room. To be safe, Remus took James's cloak. He was good at being quiet and moving without a sound, but he needn't have worried. Sirius was dead to the world. He lay on the couch, head flung back, the perfect line of his jaw exposed. Mary was curled up against his chest, a patchwork quilt thrown over the two of them. Remus hurried past, wanting to get as far away as possible. The prefect's bathroom was probably one of the weirdest parts of the castle. Remus had thought the older students were teasing him when they gave out the password in the train back in September. He went once and once only in the first term, but couldn't get past the thought of actually removing all of his clothes in such a big, open room. What if someone came in? However, on this particular morning, it was the only place he was sure he would not be found, even if the Marauders decided to use the map. They couldn't come and find him without the password. He reached the 4th floor and whispered, "Squeaky clean," at the entrance before slipping in. No one was in there. It was much too early. He had often wondered whether there was some kind of mechanism in place to stop anyone else from getting in while you were in the bath. He had so far seen no evidence of this and decided to play it safe. Stripping down to his boxers and vest, Remus ran the water and pumped a lot of bubbles into the Olympic swimming pool-sized bathtub before sliding in, still in his underthings. The bathroom was one of the most beautiful rooms in the castle, Remus acknowledged. Everything was clean white marble and glimmering golden taps. The stained glass windows depicted a series of gorgeous, shimmering sea creatures. A lovely tangerine smell was rising from the great white drifts of foam, and Remus finally began to relax. He had never learnt how to swim. The St. Edmund's boys were offered lessons down at the local swimming baths for free, but Matron wouldn't let him go. He hadn't minded. He didn't want the other boys to see his scars, but now he was older, he thought he'd like to learn. Sirius had once talked about family holidays in the south of France, where the sea was warm enough to bathe in. Remus couldn't imagine that. The only sea he'd ever seen was at Southend and once Margate. It was bloody freezing, a dirty grey-green colour, not the crystal azure Sirius had described. Still, Remus could float. He lay on his back and stared up at the chambered ceiling. Having fun? Not really. So if he kissed you back and then ran off and kissed Mary, where does that leave things? I don't know, do I? That's what you're supposed to help me figure out. All right, calm your tits. You don't say that. Sirius says that. Look, I'm doing my best. I told you I'm not even real. Maybe I was a really bad kisser. Maybe. The real Grant is a lot nicer than you know? Yeah, well, whose fault is that? You're the one talking to yourself, you nutter. Find someone real to talk to. Remus sighed, frowning. Could you be a bad kisser and not know it? Probably. He didn't have enough experience to know. It hadn't felt bad, it had felt like they fit. He kissed me back. Remus knew deep down that it had nothing to do with how he'd done it. It was the very fact that he'd done it at all. He knew it, but he wasn't ready to address it yet, not even with an imaginary person. If he was being thoroughly truthful, Remus knew that Sirius had every right to run away, to be shocked, confused, or even frightened. And there was a mad kind of Sirius Black logic behind snogging the very first honest-to-goodness girl he could find, right after something like that. Once again, Remus was confronted with the image of Sirius pressing Mary up against the mantelpiece, those hands on her waist that had been on his waist only moments before, and he kicked involuntarily, forgetting to stay afloat. Spluttering and choking as he went under, Remus scrabbled back to the surface and came up coughing, orange-hued foam going everywhere. "Remus, is that you?" A girl's voice echoed across the bathroom floor. He struggled to wipe his hair out of his face, blinking, and just made out the blurry outline of Lily Evans in a pink-quilted dressing gown. He rubbed his eyes hard, his feet finding the floor, and choked out, "Hiya, Lily." "Christ, are you okay? Thought I'd have to dive in and save you there. Lost my balance. I can't believe you beat me to a bath. I thought I'd be the first up. Got a filthy headache." Lily rubbed her forehead with a pained expression. "Yeah, that punch was pretty strong," Remus replied, though he felt fine. "I was just getting out. Do you mind turning around?" "Oh, okay, sorry," Lily smiled, turning her back. Remus moved to the side and pulled himself up out of the warm water with some reluctance. He felt silly and girlish, asking her not to look. James or Sirius probably wouldn't care at all. Grabbing a towel, he wrapped it around himself over his shoulders rather than around his waist. That wasn't exactly manly either, but he didn't need Evans asking about his scars on top of everything else. "Okay," he said, hurrying into a changing cubicle. He heard Lily running the taps again, and a sweet lavender smell filled the room as he dried off and changed into his uniform. "So where did you disappear to last night?" Lily called, over the noise of running water. "We must have gone on till at least 2. Potter was so pissed." "Must have got a bit too drunk," Remus called back. "Went to bed at midnight." "Lightweight," Lily teased. He heard the taps go off and a soft splash as she got in the bath. "Still," she carried on, "at least Sirius and Mary made up, eh?" "Yeah, that was lucky," he replied, evenly, exiting his stall. Lily was bobbing about at the far end of the pool, her red hair piled up on top of her head, surrounded by a sea of purple foam. She smiled at him. "Library," he said, feeling awkward and clammy, fully dressed in the warm, steamy bathroom. "Of course," she laughed. "Where else? Oh, did you see that notice in the common room?" "No," he shook his head. He had not looked at anything but Sirius in the common room. "Career meetings with McGonagall have been posted mid-April." "Oh, good." Remus felt his limbs grow heavy. "Thanks." It was a relief to be out of the hot bathroom, and rather than the library, Remus decided to go outside for a bit, to the greenhouses and back, maybe. There were sometimes a few Hufflepuffs hanging around there dealing pot, and even though it was a school day, and he hadn't even had breakfast yet, this seemed like a very good idea. "This is all your fault, you know. How's that? If you hadn't snogged me last summer, I'd still be—" "Oblivious? Confused? Normal. That's a bloody lie, and you know it. Wanting to get your end away is the only normal thing about you. Fair enough. You're glad I snogged you. You bloody loved it. Yeah. You're only annoyed because Sirius didn't react the way you did. Yeah. The question is, why the bloody hell would you expect Sirius to act anything like you? Why indeed?" This was the first bit of useful advice imaginary Grant had dredged up, and Remus clung to it. Sirius needed to do whatever it was Sirius needed to do. It wasn't for Remus to decide. He congratulated himself on being very mature about this whole thing. After all, he thought, at least it's done now. At least you know what it's like. Could you survive forever, he wondered, on one kiss? Fortunately, there were indeed 3 Hufflepuffs sitting on the grass behind the greenhouses, 2 girls and a boy. They smiled at him in that friendly, stupid way that told him they had started early, and in slow and gentle tones congratulated him on the excellent party. He sat with them until he couldn't ignore his hunger pangs anymore and staggered back to the castle dizzily for breakfast. "Here he is," James boomed as Remus took his place at the table. Peter, who had his head in his hands and looked a bit green around the gills, groaned, "Not so bloody loud, Prongs, I'm begging you. Oh, eat your eggs, you'll feel better." James grinned. Remus piled up his own plate with 2 fried eggs, 2 sausages, a pile of baked beans, 3 slices of toast, 2 slices of fried tomato, and 3 rashers of bacon. He felt very calm and comfortable now. He could tell himself it had been the bath, but obviously not. "I can't tell if you're hungover or it's just that incredible metabolism of yours." Marlene grimaced at his plate. "Bit of both," Remus shrugged, tucking in. "And something else?" James wagged his finger. "Been down at the greenhouses already, Mooney? Is this how you want to enter your 17th year?" "Yes," Remus said, mouth full. Sirius was there, of course, but he hadn't said anything yet. He was propping his head up sleepily on one elbow, nursing a large mug of milky tea. Remus stared at him intently, willing him to look up, but he didn't. Mary was nowhere to be seen. "MacDonald's being a wimp," Marlene explained, pulling a sickie, even though everyone saw her down an entire bottle of witch's brew by herself. "She did," Remus said. "Wow, impressive. She probably deserves a lie-in then." He meant it sincerely. "We're all feeling rough, though," Marlene said. "Evans was chucking up for at least an hour before bed." "Is she okay?" James asked, scandalized. "Yeah, I saw her this morning in the prefect's bathroom," Remus said, swallowing his mouthful. "She's okay." "In the bathroom, eh?" James raised an eyebrow. "You've got to stop your philandering ways, Remus. Give the rest of us a chance." "Oh yeah, that's me." Remus snorted. "The Casanova of Gryffindor Tower." He'd only said it to make James laugh, but Sirius's head finally snapped up, his eyes resting on Remus. There was a tiny, almost imperceptible frown knitting his brow. He looked at Remus as if he was an incantation he hadn't yet worked out how to pronounce. Remus looked back steadily. Allowing this scrutiny, he would allow Sirius anything. Another moment and it was over. Sirius looked away, saying nothing. Chapter 88, 5th year, stalemate. "So messed up, I want you here. In my room, I want you here. Now we're going to be face to face, and I'll lay right down in my favorite place. And now I want to be your dog. Now I want to be your dog. Now I want to be your dog." "Well, come on." Tuesday the 16th of March, 1976. By the time the next full moon arrived, it became clear that Remus and Sirius had reached a stalemate. Remus had tried being indirect, catching Sirius's eye during meals or the rare evenings they were all together. He tried hanging back in the dorm room to see if Sirius would stay behind too, but no luck. Sirius's eyes never met his, and he was always the first to leave a room with Remus in it. Short of actually ambushing Sirius somewhere, which he refused to do, Remus was running out of options. The plea for another phone call with Grant was returned, with a note in Matron's neat, brutally clear handwriting on the envelope. Recipient no longer known at this address. He was completely alone. Once, Remus thought he'd got close to catching Sirius. They were leaving Charms, and James had stopped back to talk to Professor Flitwick, and Peter had nipped to the loo, so Remus and Sirius found themselves waiting alone in a busy corridor. He seized the chance, saying quietly, "Look, about the other night—" "Yeah, we were all so pissed, right?" Sirius laughed loudly, loud enough for people to turn and look. "Mental! Can hardly remember half of it." Yeah, right." Remus withdrew. It was a complete lie, they both knew that. But it was one of those awful cases where neither of them were supposed to acknowledge the lie, just keep stepping over it. You couldn't push Sirius any further than he was willing to go, and he was clearly not willing to go there. Then, of course, there was Mary. If Sirius did want Remus in the same way Remus wanted Sirius, then surely the Mary thing would be over. But no, Remus was going to have to come to terms with the fact that it wasn't the Mary thing. It was his best friend's relationship, and it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. She was everywhere he was, and more often than not on his lap. During this time, Remus briefly flirted with the idea of leglimency. Being able to read Sirius's mind was very appealing. He soon gave up, finding it much more difficult than anything else he'd ever attempted. Plus, with his revision schedule now in full swing, he had very little room in his head for new spells. Now, on the night of the full moon, Remus sat alone in the shrieking shack, waiting for his friends to arrive and not sure if they would be 2 or 3. He was getting a bit paranoid, actually, but that wasn't Sirius's fault. In an attempt at escapism, Remus had been spending more and more time down at the greenhouses, spacing out and filling up with dozy green smoke. Not ideal. Better than drinking, he supposed. Better than getting detentions for stupid pranks. He'd smoked that particular day to calm his nerves around the moon and to see if it had any effect on the transformation pains. Though goodness only knew what a stoned werewolf would be like. A sharp pain seared his shoulder blades, and he gasped with surprise. Well, that was that experiment done with. "Evening, Moony." The door opened, and James poked his head around. "It's starting." Remus clenched his jaw. "Hurry up, get in." James quickly transformed and was followed into the room by a large brown rat and a big black dog. Remus closed his eyes, relieved. The night of the full moon was no different from any other they'd had so far. As animals, they were less conscious, or perhaps just less concerned by their more human problems. The wolf only wanted to run and hunt, to roll about in the undergrowth and chase the black one and play fight the big one. The next morning he felt refreshed and invigorated, or at least he would have if it weren't for the bone-crushing agony of returning to human form. Some things never changed. The Marauders crept out only 20 minutes or so before Madame Pumphrey appeared to take Remus back to school. In the hospital wing, she gave him his usual deep sleep potion, and he did not open his eyes until well after midday. This was always going to be a problem, he had realized lately. No matter how much his monthly transformations had been improved, he still lost so much time. He'd already checked and found that the May full moon did not coincide with any exams. This seemed very odd to him until he realized that it must have been orchestrated this way by Dumbledore or McGonagall. He found that a bit embarrassing. Didn't they know he had sat through classes before with his blood boiling and his muscles aching? That he had finished essays after being up for 2 days, head throbbing and so tired he only had adrenaline left for fuel? And he had still beaten half the class. He could do it. They just had to let him. How would he ever get a job after school if he couldn't be seen to be keeping up? When Remus opened his eyes at about 4 o'clock, he was very surprised to see Sirius there, alone. "Morning," he smiled softly, a trace of anxiety still clinging to his features. That might not be because of Remus. Sirius was often anxious these days. If Snape was Remus's malevolent shadow, then Regulus was Sirius's. It seemed even if you left the Black family in everything but name, you were never really free of the sense of obligation, or the guilt. That could be the case with all families, Remus reflected. He wouldn't know. "Morning," he nodded back, pulling himself up. "Good night, wasn't it?" "Yeah, great," Sirius nodded, eager for some familiar territory. "Can't believe we found that waterfall. Prongs reckons there's a cave behind it. Told him if there is, then a troll probably lives there. They like caves, don't they?" "They do, yeah." It wasn't awkward exactly. They chatted like this all the time, but they didn't usually struggle to keep a conversation going, quite the opposite, in fact. Sirius was looking at the ceiling when, out of the blue, he said, "We're okay, aren't we, Moony?" His voice was small. "Course," Remus said hurriedly. "Because you, James, Pete, you're my best mates." "Yeah, you're my best mate, you all are." "Okay, good." Sirius looked relieved, and Remus was glad he'd said the right thing, but his face seemed to grow troubled again. There's Mary just now, too." "Mary," Remus repeated. "Yeah, I said I'd go and meet her. Pete'll be along in a bit." "No, it's fine. Once Madame Pumphrey's back, she'll probably let me out. I'll see you this evening?" "Yeah, of course," Sirius grinned, looking more comfortable than he had in weeks. We understand each other now. See you at dinner, mate." He said this last word with an overly jocular blokiness that was very unlike him. Remus was surprised he didn't punch him on the arm or knuckle his hair. Wednesday, the 14th of April, 1976. The next month passed in a blur of quills, books and parchment. Remus couldn't be sure whether or not he and Sirius were still at odds because he simply didn't have the time to worry about it. When they did see each other, in lessons, in the corridors, or yawning goodnight to each other before bed, everything seemed perfectly fine. Remus's study group had doubled in size until he had to break them up by different subjects for each day of the week. The sessions mostly took the form of running through past written papers from previous years, sharing their answers, pointing out key extracts from their various textbooks. Remus felt that he was learning just as much as he was teaching, and he was really enjoying it. "How come you're not in Ravenclaw?" Christopher asked one day as he helped Remus tidy up the disused classroom where they'd been practicing levitation. It was a mess. "My dad was, actually." Remus smiled softly. That didn't hurt as much as it used to. There were other things more important. "And the hat did mention it at my sorting, but not to be." "Seems like you would have been better off there," Christopher said, repairing a shattered inkwell and cleaning up the black puddle beneath. "Maybe," Remus shrugged. "If you'd known me, then you wouldn't think so." They finished this job, and Remus glanced at the clock. "Shit, I have to go. Sorry, Chris. Will you be okay getting back to the tower?" "Pure blood privilege," Christopher said, making a face. "I don't get bothered. Where you going?" It's private, sorry. Thanks for the help." He had to run in the end to get to the hospital wing in time. Madame Pumphrey scolded him lightly. No physical exercise on full moons. She said, fastening her cloak, "You'll get yourself agitated, and we've had such a good year." "I'll be fine." He waved a hand, a little too casually. Maybe he ought to get Prongs to scratch him up a bit so that she didn't get suspicious. No way would Prongs do it, though. They began to walk out into the grounds together, a journey so familiar now they could do it in their sleep. "I could do this bit on my own now," he said, conversationally. "I know how it all works well enough. You'd only need to get me in the mornings then." "Sorry, dear," she shook her head. "Dumbledore's orders. I'm to make sure you're safely off the grounds on time." "Oh, of course." He tried not to sound ungrateful. Of course, that was a concern, that he might forget or run late. Then what? It would be much worse than this, he thought, once he turned 17 and had to register with the ministry. Inside the shack, Madame Pumphrey shrieked, "What's wrong?" Remus withdrew his wand. "Oh, nothing." She clutched her chest. I saw a rat. Horrible things. Sorry, dear. I wish we could find a nicer place for you." "Oh, it's fine. See you in the morning." When the door closed, he spun around. "Pete, was that you?" "Sorry, Mooney." Peter's voice came from upstairs. "I was supposed to be keeping guard." He came down the staircase, followed by Sirius and James, who were yawning, and looked as though they'd just woken up. "What are you two doing here?" Remus asked, surprised. "What about the match?" "We've been sleeping since the final bell," James explained. "Then we'll get another hour or two's kip in the morning, and lunchtime if we can swing it." "You're mental." Remus shook his head. "Both of you." He looked at Sirius to check if they were still playing the eye-contact game. "Anything for our Mooney," Sirius said, holding his gaze for a good few seconds before dropping it, looking away and rubbing his arm. This satisfied Remus, though he knew he ought to feel guilty. He didn't know why he took so much pleasure in watching Sirius squirm. "We're early," Peter said, sitting on Remus's little cot. "Aren't we, Remus?" "Yeah, I think so." He stretched a little bit to get a feel for his various aches and twinges. "Yeah, I'm a way off." "Oh, good. Can I go back to sleep?" Sirius yawned. He and James had settled themselves on the floor, and Sirius was resting his head on James's shoulder. "Fuck you, James," Remus thought before stopping himself. He leaned against the wall self-consciously. "Oi, when's your appointment with McGonagall?" James asked, shrugging his shoulder to shake Sirius off. First thing next Friday, I think. Why? What are you going to say?" "Say? About careers, idiot. Oh, right. Sirius stifled another yawn, his eyes watering with tiredness. I don't know. Don't really fancy the idea of a job much. Father wanted me to go into politics, so I suppose not that. My mum says it's a bad time to join the ministry, Peter said thoughtfully. But Desi reckons it's the best time. When the war's over, we'll be in on the ground floor to rebuild. Well, that's one way of looking at it. Sirius raised an eyebrow. He nudged James. Go on then. Tell us what your plans are. James looked at him innocently. Oh, come on, Potter. Don't tell me you haven't got it all laid out in front of you. Puddlemere, Holyhead, the Cannons. Who's shown the most interest so far? Actually, James raised his head in a very dignified way. If you must know, they've all inquired, according to McGonagall, but I'm turning them down, for now anyway. Oh yeah? Going to have a gap year and live off your sleek, easy millions? No, you git, I'm going to fight. There was a weird sort of pause. Sirius looked deeply troubled. Remus broke it. You what, mate? Well, James looked uncharacteristically nervous about this. The war won't end unless people fight it. Mum and Dad are working so hard and, well, I couldn't be any kind of son if I didn't help, would I? Dumbledore needs as many people as he can get. Plus, he laughed shakily, if Wormy wants a job at the ministry, we'd better make sure the ministry is still standing, right? So, when you speak to McGonagall, you'll say, that Quidditch can wait, that I want to do everything I can to make sure the wizarding world is safe for everyone, not just purebloods. Yeah, pretty much, James ended, simply, looking down at his hands. Quiet again. Finally, Sirius muttered, then that's what I'll say, too. Mate, you don't have to... What else am I going to do? Retire with my uncle's inheritance and let you have all the fun? Piss off. Me too, Peter said suddenly, eager to be included. I can help. Course you can, James beamed. You're a marauder. That's basically the best qualification you can have. What about you, Moony? Peter gabbled, excited and bright-eyed. I'm going to... Too late. Here it comes. Shit! Change! Quick! They all leapt up, ready to take their animal forms. The last thing Remus saw clearly was his three friends standing together, thinking about their futures. Chapter 89, 5th year the week before. Friday the 23rd of April, 1976. Good afternoon, Mr. Lupin. Professor McGonagall smiled as he entered her office. Good afternoon, Professor, he replied politely, sitting on the chair opposite her desk. All ready for your exams? I think so. I have every faith in you, she smiled. McGonagall's smile was given only when she felt the situation deserved it. For this reason, Remus smiled back. The middle-aged witch looked down at a pile of parchment smoothed out before her, notes from his other professors, perhaps. She cleared her throat, looked up, and smiled again. You have received consistently strong results during your time at Hogwarts. Not the whole time, he murmured, thinking of those wasted months in first year. You are a prefect, McGonagall continued, a generally well-behaved, thoughtful young man. You seem to excel in your charm work and history, and I hear you have even gathered some pupils of your own. I just don't mind helping out, he explained, embarrassed, if people get stuck. An admirable quality, Mr. Lupin. Thanks. So, she said briskly, with all of these good things in mind, have you given any thought to a career to pursue once you have completed your education? He was nervous, he realized, more nervous than he expected to be. He rubbed his damp palms on his trouser legs and tried to make eye contact. I'll have to register myself with the ministry. He saw her purse her lips, but she didn't interrupt. And, I mean, I don't know much about it, not as much as I ought to, maybe, but the war... What about the war, Lupin? She snapped. Well, people, wizards, they don't want someone like me with my problems to have jobs at all, so I thought, we cannot submit to others' low expectations of us, Lupin. You have done great things at Hogwarts, and I have no doubt you are capable of greater things still. Maybe, he shrugged, but I won't get the chance unless I get involved, I suppose. Get involved. Any trace of kindness or encouragement had left her face. Yeah. Mr. Lupin, McGonagall's brow furrowed. She looked tired, as though she'd been working on a difficult problem all day. You know that I have already spoken with Mr. Black about his own plans. Yeah. Remus wasn't sure what that had to do with anything, and I'm sure you can imagine exactly what Mr. Black's plans are. I could guess. He didn't need to guess. They had all discussed it last night, all four of them on James's bed. James had always been the head of the group, the leader. His innate goodness, his confidence, and his easygoing demeanour had ensured this from their very first meeting on the Hogwarts Express. But now, to Remus at least, he seemed to have taken on a new dimension of wise heroism in his decision to join Dumbledore and pit himself against Voldemort. If James was doing it, then they were all pretty sure it was the right thing to do. Sirius had spoken at length and with some emotion about his own desire to beat them. Remus had the impression that Sirius didn't see the war as political so much as extremely personal. Voldemort might as well have been his mother or his father. Peter was always excited to begin a new venture, and Remus had to admit that he was impressed. Wormtail was usually the first to point out the risks in such a plan, but James made it all seem so easy, so simple. As for Remus, there was never any question. He had no other options, as far as he could see it, and the least to lose out of all of them. The three boys he shared a room with had been his primary concern for the past 5 years, and he saw no reason for this to change when they left school. And he couldn't deny, even to himself, that staying close to Dumbledore seemed the most likely route to Greyback. He said none of this to McGonagall, of course. The professor removed her spectacles, rubbed her eyes, and covered her face with her hands. She sighed, and the sound struck Remus in a painful way, in the pit of his stomach. He had disappointed her. "Mr. Lupin, I have interviews with Mr. Potter and Mr. Pettigrew later this afternoon. Am I to assume that I will hear the same things from them? Don't any of you have any career ambitions beyond this dreadful war?" Remus shrugged, looked at his feet. She wouldn't change his mind. "There'll be time for that," he mumbled. "Afterwards." She lowered her hands, replaced her glasses, and looked at him. Her eyes were rimmed red, slightly puffy. She wasn't giving him her famous look, trying to unnerve him into giving the right answer. The expression she wore was something different entirely, one that didn't suit her at all. He didn't like it. "I didn't become a teacher for this," she said very quietly, her voice strained. He didn't know what to say to that. He felt sorry, but he didn't want to say so, in case she pounced on this as an avenue to dissuading him. "I think Peter wants to do something at the Ministry," he offered, "afterwards." "Well, that's a start at least." McGonagall smiled tightly and reshuffled her papers. "Now, Mr. Lupin, let's talk about newts, shall we?" Thursday, the 14th of May, 1976. Shakily, Remus made his ways to the very top of the Quidditch stands. He found his friends Lily, Mary, Peter and Desdemona waiting excitedly as the crowd began to cheer. He sat next to Desdemona, who was wearing Peter's red and gold scarf. "Hi, Desi." Remus smiled and gave a little wave. Are you cold?" "I'm trying to blend in," she giggled. "Petey thought they wouldn't let a Ravenclaw sit here." "Oh." "Should you be here, Moony?" Peter asked, watching the players walk out onto the pitch with a pair of binoculars. "Feeling okay?" "Oh no, have you been ill again, Remus?" Desdemona clucked sympathetically. Remus was just, Peter stammered, realizing his mistake. "Out by the greenhouses," Remus said blandly. "I'm stoned out of my mind." He was stone-cold sober, but Desdemona was an innocent sort of girl. Okay," she smiled politely, but inched away from him, slightly. He had slipped out while Madame Pumphrey was in her office. He felt bad about it, and would apologize later, but he had to see his friends play. They would do the same for him. It was Gryffindor versus Hufflepuff today, and the crowd braying opposite was decked out in glorious sunshine yellow. It had rained in the night. Remus knew this because he had woken up with wet hair and feet, and the skies were a clear spring blue. Knowing that James would see this as a very good omen, Remus smiled to himself and cheered along with his friends. It was a good game, a great one for Sirius, who was in particularly good form. He never missed a bludger, and at one point made an impressive swing right in the nick of time to save the third Gryffindor chaser, leaning so far over that Remus was sure he would topple to the ground. "There's not going to be another party if we win, is there?" Lily said over the cheers as James scored his 5th goal. "I don't think we can cope with another one this close to exams." "Not if James has anything to do with it," Remus said. "He won't want to throw away the hours he's been putting in at the library." "Library? Yeah, he's been there every day almost," Peter filled in, revising his bloody arse off. "He's even more of a swot than Mooney these days." "I don't believe you." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Believe it." Remus laughed. "He's even enforced dorm room rules so he can get enough sleep between exams. We have to be completely silent after 8 o'clock. Another cheer went up. The 6th goal for James, 12th overall for Gryffindor. "Ha!" Peter roared. "They'll never catch up now." Gryffindor won, of course. Remus wasn't sure if James had yet lost a game. As soon as the final whistle had been blown, all of the Gryffindor students poured down onto the pitch to congratulate their team. Mary was at the head of this, having run down a few minutes ahead of everyone else. Remus, as ever, was behind. He didn't usually mind, but with the moon so close behind him, he was still pretty sore, and his limp more pronounced than usual. It was probably better if he waited for everyone else to get down, he thought, less people to notice him struggling. Madame Pumphrey had once or twice suggested a walking stick for when his hip was very bad, but he wouldn't hear of it. Remus was almost all the way down the rickety wooden steps and could see James and Sirius at the centre of a red-robed mob on the Quidditch pitch. James looked up and waved at him, and Sirius caught on waving too. Remus grinned widely, hoping they could see it, and stuck a thumb up by way of congratulations. As he did so, something very sharp and hot stung his ankle just as he'd raised it to descend another step. With a yelp of surprise and pain, Remus tumbled forward, losing his balance completely and clattering down the rest of the stairs, landing in a heap at the bottom. "Ow," he thought. "Fuck," he said, pushing up with sore splintered hands and trying to get to his knees at least. The problem with being so lanky, he thought, was that there was more of you to get knocked. Dazed and confused, he was grateful that most of the crowd had their backs turned to him. He must have fallen at least 8 steps down. Then he heard it, the muffled giggling. He turned, pain shooting up his left side as he did so, and saw 3 faces hiding underneath the wooden scaffolding. It was Mulciber, Barty Crouch, and Snape. "Oopsie-daisy," Crouch cackled, showing rows of sharp white teeth, a little too small for his mouth. Poor ickle Lupin. He was fiddling with something small and metal. "Tossers," Remus muttered, righting himself, hauling his body up as quickly as possible. He fumbled in his trouser pocket for his wand, praying it hadn't been broken. No, it was fine. He withdrew it and pointed it between the gaps in the steps. His ankle was still throbbing, an itchy, biting pain. "What did you do?" "Don't blame us for your clumsiness, loony Lupin," Snape said coolly, stepping backwards into the shadows. "And get that wand out of my face before I report you for drawing on unarmed students." "Unarmed my arse," Remus growled, still aiming his wand. "Expelliarmus." But nothing happened. They really were unarmed. "What did I tell you, gentlemen?" Snape sneered at his cronies. "Loony Lupin is dangerously mad. Emphasis on the danger." Crouch was beside himself now, giggling manically as he tossed the little metal token between his hands like some weird juggling act. Was it a sickle? No, Remus could smell it now, even as they were backing away. It must be a prefect's pin, a silver one. "Oi!" he yelled suddenly, but they just laughed and kept walking. By the time James and Sirius, who had seen Remus stumble, but not much else, reached him, the 3 Slytherins were gone. "Bloody hell, you okay, Mooney?" James asked, helping him straighten up, offering an arm. "Fine, yeah. Must have tripped. Stupid long legs, eh?" Remus tried to smile. Sirius was there, and he refused to mention any kind of Slytherin attack with Sirius around. He was too unstable, too reckless these days. The hot, angry itch in his ankle was driving him mad. He hoped Murtlap Essence helped that too. Bloody Snape. What had he done that for? None of the 3 who'd attacked him were prefects, so where did they get the badge? And more specifically, why the bloody badge? The girls had arrived at the scene now and were making a fuss, telling Remus to sit down and take deep breaths, asking whether this or that hurt. It was no good saying that nothing hurt after he'd just fallen head-first down a flight of stairs, and it was no good saying that everything hurt, but that he'd had much worse. And all the while his mind kept going back to the sting in his ankle and the word Severus had used, dangerous. What did he know, or what did he think he knew? "Remus, you really are awfully pale," Lily was saying. Marlene placed a hand on his forehead, and he batted her away irritated. "I'm fine," he said. "All right, give him some air for Merlin's sake." Sirius, who had up until now said nothing at all, suddenly burst out, pushing them all out of the way. Remus looked up, squinting through a few locks of stray hair, to see Sirius with his determined face on. He put his hands on his hips in a very good imitation of James delegating jobs for a prank. "You lot go to the changing rooms or the Great Hall or wherever you're supposed to be. Moony, come on, let's go back to the castle. We'll go by the hospital wing. Prongs, you'll take my broom back." Remus almost opened his mouth to protest. He couldn't possibly go to the hospital wing, which he'd only escaped a few hours ago. Madame Pumphrey would never let him leave again once she saw the mess he'd got himself into against her orders. But Sirius was offering him a way out, so he took it. He accepted the offer of Sirius's arm and got up stiffly. Ow, he thought again. He'd badly bruised one of his knees, and his hip was worse than ever. He staggered slightly, but Sirius allowed him to lean into him. He was still in his crimson Quidditch robes, trimmed with gold, though he'd taken off the helmet, his hair coming loose from its ponytail. He smelled mildly of perspiration, fresh air and grass. "I'll come too," Mary chirped, getting up. She was taking her position as Queen Consort of Gryffindor very seriously. "No, it's fine," Sirius said, firmly but kindly. "We don't need a big fuss, do we, Moony? Come on." He gave Mary a quick peck on the cheek before leading Remus down the last few steps and off the Quidditch pitch back towards the castle. Remus pulled away as soon as he thought he could walk unassisted, and Sirius let him, but kept a steady pace so that it would take them a long time to get back. "We don't have to go and see Pumphrey if you think you're okay," he said quickly. "I just thought you'd like to get away from that lot." "Yeah, cheers," Remus nodded, cautious. "I know you hate people worrying over you." "Yeah. Moony, how did you actually fall? You never fall over even after a moon." "Oh, I don't know. Wasn't looking where I was going." Sirius seemed to accept this for now, and they kept walking. It must have taken almost half an hour for them to make it all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Sometimes Remus wished he was a Hufflepuff, if only for accessibility purposes. Finally there, Remus collapsed onto his bed, aching all over and completely exhausted. He hated being that way in front of Sirius. He didn't want to show any sign of weakness. "I'm just going to have a shower, if that's okay," Sirius said quietly. Remus nodded, closing his eyes. Once the bathroom door clicked shut, he fumbled in his bedside table for the Murtlap essence. He'd need more after the next moon, though this jar had lasted longer than any other he'd had, thanks to the Marauders. He raised his trouser leg and found the pinprick. Bastards! It was angry red and raised, slightly, like a mosquito bite. The skin around the puncture was turning deep bruise purple. The Murtlap essence didn't help at all. Definitely silver, then. Remus lay down and tried to ignore the pain, allowing his muscles to relax and sleep to take over. He was still lying in this dozy, slightly feverish state when Sirius emerged from the bathroom, a waft of muggy steam and faint aftershave. "Are you sleeping?" he whispered so gently. "Almost," Remus murmured, opening his eyes just a bit. Sirius drew the curtains closed, dimming the light in the room. He stood just by Remus's bed. He picked up the jar of Murtlap essence. "What's this for? Cut yourself?" "No." "Moony, please tell me what happened. It obviously wasn't an accident." Sirius frowned. "Don't you trust me?" "Of course I trust you." Remus frowned back. Look, I don't need you going out for revenge, okay? It's stupid and it'll blow over." "Who?" "3 Slytherins. They tripped me, yanked my foot through the stairs, that's all. Cowardly gits." Best not to mention the silver. "Which Slytherins?" Sirius's voice was hard. "Not Regulus." Remus replied hurriedly. Snape, obviously. Mulciber and Crouch. Sirius, he said as sternly as he could muster. I'm fine, okay? Please don't make it worse. I won't, Sirius said, though he sounded uncertain. They were quiet for a bit. Remus closed his eyes again, his eyelids heavy. Shall I leave you to sleep? Sirius asked, his voice gentle again. Yeah, cheers, Remus murmured, relaxing again. I'm knackered too, Sirius said lightly with half a laugh, after that match. Sort of jealous of you for having the excuse. Almost wish I could just lie down here with you and not get up again until tomorrow. Remus opened his eyes again to check Sirius's face, but he was looking away. Better get down for the feast, though. Can't miss James's victory speech. Don't go near the Slytherins, Remus said. Promise? Promise. Sirius nodded. He left the room shortly after that, and Remus fell asleep feeling satisfied that no matter how much Sirius hated Slytherin, he would never do anything so reckless that Remus could not forgive him it. Chapter 90, 5th year. Owls. When I see you walking down the street, I step on your hands and I mangle your feet. You're not the kind of person that I even want to meet. Oh, baby, you're so vicious. Thursday the 3rd of June, 1976. Owls were every bit as terrifying and satisfying as Remus had anticipated. He tried to pretend they were nothing more than the usual end-of-year exams, but this was almost impossible when everybody else seemed to have lost their heads over it. James became a veritable recluse, holed up in the library or behind his bed curtains, obsessively memorizing facts and dates he had spent the rest of the year ignoring. Peter occasionally turned very pale and stared, trembling, into space. Marlene had taken to ambushing Remus at various intervals throughout the day, demanding that he quiz her on this or that. Only Sirius seemed calm about any of it, which was just typical. When even James had shut him out, he entertained himself by distracting Mary, which had the added benefit of distracting Remus, which was horrible but bearable. Go and find a broom cupboard like everyone else, Marlene yelled, on the edge of hysteria, throwing a slipper at the couple. They were wound together on the couch in front of the fireplace. There's nowhere to go, though, Mary sighed to Remus in the library the day before Owls were due to begin. Sirius won't let me up into your dorm, and boys can't get in ours, and I don't dare get caught in a cupboard somewhere. Not with this castle crawling with wannabe Death Eaters. What? Remus finally paid attention. Has someone tried to hurt you, Mary? Oh, all the time, she shrugged with a tired smile. I'm used to it by now. At least being the only black kid at my primary school prepared me for something. That's horrible, Mary. I'm sorry. Remus squeezed her hand, feeling genuinely terrible. Mary was a very tough girl, he knew. You could get away with saying almost anything around her. She might throw a bit of a strop, but she'd forgive you quickly afterwards and never hold it against you. Still, this was something else entirely, and it was obviously having an effect. You're so sweet, Remus, she smiled kindly, squeezing his hand back. Don't worry about me, though. I've got Sirius. Remus released her hand, returning to his work before casually asking, what does he say about it? Oh, you know, that he'll defend me to the death, that nothing they do can ever come between us. To be honest, I think he has a bit of a white knight complex. Well, Remus closed his book and looked up at her. You're no damsel in distress. Mary's face split in a lovely grin. She really was very beautiful. Cheers, Remus. Knew I could count on you to support the women's lib argument. Right, can we go over the defense against the dark arts paper again? Professor Drosky hinted there'd be something on either werewolves or vampires. Remus would never know whether it was the increased attacks on Muggleborns, and therefore Mary, that caused the incident which took place after the Data written exam. He flattered himself once or twice that it could have had something to do with Severus's dogged pursuit of Remus, even though Sirius had promised not to retaliate. He liked to think, later on, that James and Sirius had acted out of a kind of righteous indignation, that this was a chance to prove they had picked a side. In reality, it was probably a mixture of reasons, none of them noble. The heightened tension of Owls, combined with the relief of having just finished an exam. Growing tensions that had been simmering all year, in fact for a number of years, between Gryffindor and Slytherin. Severus Snape simply being an annoying prick, James wanting to impress Lily, Sirius's merciless aggression towards anyone who so much as hinted allegiance to the other side. In short, no one was quite themselves that day, and it was hot. These two factors alone might have been enough to bring a situation to boiling point. The fact that Sirius was playing the bored aristocrat and that James was eager to please him was nothing new, and could potentially be explained away later as obnoxious teenage behaviour. Besides, those who knew Sirius and what he had suffered were inclined to pander to him, allow him to put on airs, and James was particularly indulgent. The level of cruelty was certainly new and could not be explained so easily. Unfortunately, as the years would go on, Remus would see more and more of this ruthlessness, not always from his friends, but certainly from people he had thought were good. It would always seem to Remus that this was the day the war truly started, as far as the Marauders were concerned. Remus did not consider himself blameless, of course. He could have stepped in. He did put down his Transfiguration book when Lily got involved, but he had assumed she would shut everything down, scold James, and move on. He certainly hadn't expected Snape to say what he had said, or for James to do what he did next. Part of him had enjoyed it too. Part of him liked seeing Snape humiliated and tormented without Mulciber around to back him up. It was horrible to see Lily so insulted, of course, and when James started really going for it, Remus had to bite his lip to keep from cheering and laughing along with everyone else. He ought to have stopped it. He ought to have stood up to his friends, taken control, and been the better man. He just didn't feel like it. Whether or not his intervention would have improved or worsened the situation, or the events that followed, Remus might never know, but he did wish he had tried. "You've blown any chance you ever had of being with her now, mate?" Sirius laughed as Lily stormed out of the dining hall later that day upon seeing James at the table. "Fine," James said, scowling. "Do you know what? I've wasted too much bloody time pining after her, and if that's how she feels—" "Isn't it how she's always felt?" Peter asked, pouring out his gravy glumly. Another casualty of the altercation with Snape. Peter and Desdemona had apparently had a blazing row over it. She thought it was bullying. She couldn't see what Snape had done wrong. "Shut it, Pettigrew." Sirius rolled his eyes. He addressed James. "Forget about her, Prongs. She's always been up herself." "Oi!" Mary slapped his thigh lightly. "Lily's my friend, if you don't mind, though, James, I do think you'd better leave her alone for a bit. She's really upset." "Really?" Remus asked, feeling guilty. He ought to have stopped it. "Of course," Mary replied, neatly slicing up her roast potatoes. "Don't ask me why, but Snivelus has been her best friend since they were kids. I've tried telling her what a massive tosser he is, but it doesn't really get through. She feels sorry for him, I think. He's madly in love with her, of course." "Ugh, she doesn't like him back, does she?" James looked scandalized. "No," Mary shrugged, "but they're friends all the same. Or at least they were. She's not talking to him now." Remus made a mental note to check whether she was okay. That was, if Lily was still speaking to him. Her final outburst had definitely felt like an attack on all of the Marauders, not just James. Friday the 12th of June, 1976. The Transfiguration written exam was the following week, and Remus was over-prepared, if anything. He had a burning desire to beat James, if he couldn't beat Sirius at it. He thought he could probably best them in the written, if he couldn't in the practical. The paper was 3 hours long and demanded a huge amount of concentration. Remus only looked up twice, both times to check on Sirius. The first time he was working on his essay, his quill moving smoothly as if skating over the parchment rather than scribbling away like James or Peter. The second time he was leaning back on his chair, trying to catch James's eye. Remus sighed. It was so much harder to concentrate this close to the moon. He felt more animal than usual. He was really looking forward to the upcoming moon as much as he knew it was foolish. It would be the last one of the school year, and all 4 of them had been planning it quietly over the past week. Exams would be finished, and they were practically invincible, with what felt like the whole world at their feet. James swore he had caught a glimpse of a unicorn last time, and they'd been reading up on how to track them down. Remus wasn't sure what the wolf might do faced with a unicorn, but there was no evidence he would attack. Centaurs were something else altogether. Centaurs terrified the wolf. When the exam finished, the students were instructed to stand back against the walls of the Great Hall while McGonagall magically collected in all of the papers alphabetically, in the most elegant use of Accio Remus had ever seen, and reinstated the house tables ready for dinner. Across the hall, Snape was glaring at James furiously. "Dunno what more he wants," James tutted. "We've got detention, haven't we?" "Did a teacher see you?" Mary asked, as they wended their way over to their usual seats for dinner. "Nah, bloody Evans," Sirius groaned. "My dear friend Lily," Mary said firmly. "Whatever." Sirius grunted. "She'd just better not drag it out until tomorrow night." "Why?" Mary asked, smiling as dinner appeared on the empty plates before them. "Spaghetti bolognese. Taking me somewhere nice for once." "I think the 6th floor girls' loo is nice," Sirius replied sarcastically. "Anyway, no, got something else. Marauder business." "Oh, yeah, of course," Mary sighed, as if she was terribly hard done by. "I forgot I have to share my boyfriend with his boyfriends." James and Peter snickered, but Sirius bristled like a cat. "Fuck's sake," he spat, looking daggers at her from across the table. "Why do you have to say shit like that, spiteful cow?" "Pure blood snob," she returned, sweetly, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "Please," Remus said, battling a headache. "Peter and Desdemona are arguing this week. You'll get your turn next week." That made everyone laugh and went some way to calming the atmosphere. Remus was pleased with himself. He was really getting the hang of the whole relationship thing without ever having to actually be in one. By the time dinner was over, all was well again, and when James got up to go for detention, Sirius told him he would catch up later. "I want to make sure Mary gets back to the tower okay," he explained. "You don't have to," she said. "I'm not going alone. Remus is coming too, aren't you, Remus?" "Yeah," he nodded, hoisting his book bag up onto his shoulder. "I'm finally going to read something with a plot, now exams are over." "Such a thrilling life you lead, Moony," Sirius smirked. He clasped Mary's hand. "Still, I'd rather come with you, so I don't worry." "How can you be such a prick one minute and then so sweet the next?" Mary sighed, kissing him. Remus looked away politely. That was very much the question, with Sirius, he thought. That was exactly what you were getting yourself into with him. "All right, but don't be too long," James said. "Detention is with Filch. Evans is a sadist, I swear." "Won't take 15 minutes, Sirius assured him, and they set off, the three of them, Remus walking just a bit behind the whole way. "Oh, for God's sake," Mary said loudly as they reached the portrait hole, and Remus peered around to see what the hold-up was. "Ah, of course, Snape again." Reflexively, Remus reached for his wand. "Look, she's not interested in talking to you, so bugger off," Mary snapped, still holding Sirius's hand. "Black," Severus drawled, "tell your muggle bitch to shut up." "What did you call me?" Mary shrieked as Sirius whipped out his own wand and raised it. "This is the time," Remus thought to himself. "This is the time to be a prefect. This is the time to be brave." Sirius had just opened his mouth when Remus stepped forward, standing between the two dark-haired boys. "Stop it right now," he said in his most dangerous voice. "Snape, go back to your own common room or I'll give you detention. Black, just calm down, okay?" Sirius was red in the face and did not lower his wand. Snape cocked an eyebrow. "Listen to him, Black. Even Loony Lupin knows you couldn't beat me in a duel." "That's not what I said," Remus hissed. "Shut up and get lost." "Should I get someone?" Mary asked, nervously watching Sirius's face. "No, it's okay. Just go in," Remus said, watching her crawl through the portrait hole. He turned back to Sirius. "Come on. You've got detention now. Let's go." "You're not looking well, Loony Lupin," Severus said suddenly. Remus turned, confused. What fresh hell? "Coming up on your time of the month, is it?" The implication was clear. Remus was speechless, shocked. He gaped, finding his voice. You don't know what you're talking about." Snape smiled, obviously thrilled to have wrought such a reaction. He looked at Sirius now. "You all know, of course. You and Potter and that little rodent Pettigrew. You know what he is?" I always wondered why 3 purebloods would want to waste their time on filthy scum like him, but now I see. He's your little pet project, isn't he, Black? Confringo, Expelliarmus. Remus and Sirius both shouted their incantations at the same time, but Remus was quicker and had Sirius's wand in his hand before any further damage could be done. He rounded on Snape now. "I don't know what you think you know," he said very low, standing over the Slytherin boy, pointing 2 wands directly at his face. "But whatever it is, you're wrong. Now get back to the dungeons before I summon McGonagall." Snape, who had paled very slightly, gave a minuscule nod before edging around the 2 Gryffindors and slinking away down the corridor. Remus didn't take the wands off him until he was definitely gone, and he didn't give Sirius his back until the last moment. Sirius snatched it and glared at him. "What did you do that for?" "Sirius, do you want another detention? Didn't you hear the things he said about Mary? The things he said about you?" "Of course I did." Remus folded his arms coldly. "And he's a complete knob who you humiliated yesterday and who you promised me you wouldn't go after." "Yeah, but—" "You promised, Sirius." Remus stared him down. He saw the look in Sirius's eyes. He had just realized that they were completely alone and standing quite close. He stepped back smartly. "I know what I said," he replied, his voice still thick with rage. "But I won't have him spreading rumors about you. He deserves a taste of his own bloody medicine." "Sirius," Remus moaned, "please, just go to your detention and calm down, okay? I'll see you later." Years later, Remus would look back on that conversation with the benefit of hindsight and scold himself for leaving things that way. But they were not yet the men they would become, and as much as Remus liked to think he was mature and intuitive, he was about to learn that he still didn't know the first thing about Sirius. Besides, he didn't have the patience. The moon was coming.